I don't know where this should be, but
Yeah, it's perfect.
cool.
So we at least want to be able to see each other while we're talking.
Got it.
Because if this gets too high, and then what's going to happen is you'll start using your hands and you'll start like hitting the mic. And
Okay.
it's a thing. It's okay.
I believe it.
So does the office space now make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. It's a long way from when we were working out of the garage of our 2-family.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
Now you have like adequate space.
Space, people. Yeah. So this is Heather.
Hi.
Heather's the first, this is the first official episode, first guest on the podcast. I thought it was fitting because you were the president of the first association we ever had back when I was not trying to be a property manager
Right.
or a management company. Some days I still wonder whether that was the right choice, but it's been working.
Which one? Getting into it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been working out, like it's fine, but it was not like, when you grow up as a kid, it's not like I'm going to be a property manager.
Yeah. It's tough. It's not a position I'd want to be in.
Yeah. And it's been interesting to go through like the many stages of, grief or whatever it is. Cause like you first get the condo and you're like, oh man, this property management company sucks. They do everything bad. And then you get in, you're like, oh man, they're really bad. And then you get them out and you're like, I can do so much better. And then you try to do your best and people really like it. But then you realize like the bigger you grow and the more clients you get, you start realizing that like it is a lot harder.
Like how it can go wrong.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
like what I thought was just, obviously negligent when I was a unit owner. Now, like having 12 properties, it's like, it's tough to keep up with everybody.
Well, it's probably hard too when you have certain individuals that are constantly taking up your time.
Yes.
And then some that are quiet forever, but when they do speak up, it's important.
Right.
So just kind of learning the different personalities and like what's actually an emergency and what's not.
Yes. I was actually, so part of this whole thing is to promote a training program for
Okay.
self-managing associations. Smaller associations, like less than 50 unit, I think that they can take advantage of just efficiency of smaller size and do it themselves, but they have to be taught to do it the right way.
Okay.
So part of that training course, I'm kind of like killing two birds with one stone because I'm training my assistant Bella in like the whole thing. And also because it's super weird to just talk to a camera. So it's easier to just talk to someone else.
Okay.
So I'm training her and we're recording it so that smaller associations can then, buy that program for, $9.95 or whatever it is, and learn how to self-manage their own associations. But my point is that in that module, I asked her, I said, do we take everybody's word equally? Do we listen to everybody equally? And she was like, yeah. I was like, no. I was like,
Okay. Well, what's the correct answer and what's the answer people want to hear?
what people want to hear is, yes, you treat everybody equally.
And well, at first you do,
You do, yes, at first.
but then you learn again who makes the smallest thing seem like the biggest thing and who's just constantly in your ear.
Right.
And you want people to speak up, but you only have so much time, but you also only have so many dollars. And when you have money that needs to be spread across a whole association, you can't just constantly do what Unit 1A wants.
Right.
So
But there's acorns.
you kind of learn those things.
There's acorns falling on my car.
Oh my gosh.
On my BMW, there's acorns.
I'll actually never forget that. That was...
We need to take those trees down. It's dropping acorns on my car.
Yeah, I mean, note to everyone, if you live in the woods, there will be animals and leaves and other things that you would expect in the woods.
That's right. Especially when the whole shtick of that community is that it's a beautiful woodsy property.
Yeah, and private.
And private.
It's nice.
With trees.
With trees.
And squirrels.
Yes. We have like 3 different kinds too.
Yeah. Well, you guys were like the king of black squirrels.
I know.
Forever.
I had never seen one ever. and then brown, and then obviously standard gray. But I was like, I've lived in Connecticut my whole life. I've never seen anything other than a gray squirrel.
They're all there.
Yeah, we can talk about this for a while.
I know. Let's move on. All right. So next up. So I wanted to bring you on because I know my version of the story or my perspective of kind of how things went down,
Okay.
but I've never heard your version because obviously like I live my life every day. Like I know the steps that led up to me being in the position to be hired on the board with you and all this stuff. But I'm just curious as to your experience and your perspective of like, you were there before me.
Right.
And you were, what was this, the lineage of events to us ending up managing you, to me even becoming a property manager and us managing you guys from your perspective? Like, just how did it all play out?
So, I mean, I bought my condo in 2015. That sounds right. And basically, I mean, I was 24. Like, I knew nothing about HOA, but I knew that I wanted my own place. So anyways, not getting into too much detail, but I felt that after some of the meetings and just seeing how little input people provided, that I should join the board. So then I joined the board, and then I took a treasurer position. And I've always loved finance, so like that made sense. I would dig in. That particular property management company did not like me very much, probably just because I kicked back on so many things and questioned so many things. But again, I can only do the best that I can do myself, and it takes a board. And this isn't discounting anyone on the board. It's just these are normal people. Like, this isn't their job. We're not getting paid. We don't know what their background is. So I'm thankful that I have the knowledge I have around finances, but the treasurer position is pretty important. So anyways, we had a different president at the time, and then he left like partial way through his 2-year commitment. And then I was actually not at the next meeting, but apparently the conversation was that they felt I made sense to step into that role. And then we were digging in, and then I remember you had gone to one of the meetings, and I think some more fresh eyes like yours were looking at things, and we already knew we had problems with the property management company. I mean, I was shocked that we had them for so long. But again, if I'm the only one speaking up, then it seems like a me thing. But then once new people came in, we realized how poorly they were managing the property. And then again, more eyes on it, where we were digging in and looking, and some of the finances didn't really make sense. Some requests weren't being done. The office was unresponsive. And then you had bought a unit, but then I guess looking through all the paperwork, you had decided kind of my thoughts like, this doesn't seem great.
Right.
So, and again, not discounting any board members. You do what you can with the dollars you have. But in my opinion, and maybe it was naive, but a lot of people, if you've never owned a condo, like, you don't know what to expect from the HOA and from your property management and all that. So how do you even know what are the right things? And you're paying money into it, and some things are getting done, so you just kind of assume it's all going well. And to me, you're trusting the property manager to have your best interest.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the breakdown. If they're doing things that aren't great or aren't even legitimate, people have to catch that. And that's a shame, because you're paying a good amount of money for these people to take care of you.
Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, we just had a a complex hired us, and we're going back. And I did basically a month after I got hired, I was asked to do the budget for the next year.
Yep.
And I'm looking at the budget from the previous year, and I'm adding the numbers up, and like there was just simply $100,000 missing.
The math isn't mathing?
Yeah,
Isn't that what they say now?
The math isn't mathing. Yes. It was just like for the income categories, like, okay, $250 times 70 units is $100,000 less than what you have budgeted for your income category.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not a rounding error.
Yeah, right. And so, and the worst part is, they hadn't had a meeting in 2 years.
Oh, well.
And so this budget had been ongoing for the previous 2 years. So their shortfall was $200,000 since the last meeting, and nobody caught it. Like none of the board members, no treasurer, nobody just said,
So that's definitely that is glaring.
yeah.
So that's a tough one. And I can see how people would be upset about that. However, again, just so many layers in that. Like, why didn't you have any meetings? I mean, when I was on the board, it was monthly.
Yeah. So that boiled down to they were trying to, and the previous manager was having personal issues and this, that, and the
For
third.
2 years?
For 2 years.
It's a lot of personal issues.
I know. Which is why,
I mean, and maybe,
Yeah.
everyone, some people do have a tough life. So I don't want to laugh, but
hey, man.
it's unlikely that was legitimately for that duration where they couldn't have someone else step in then.
Right.
If you have a full office of staff, you can't appoint someone else to run the meeting.
Yeah. Well, so I just had this conversation with the old property manager yesterday because I need some docs, and he ended up telling me a little bit about what happened. So he started the company with his mom, and his mom was like, the answer phone secretary person who held down the office. She was the one who died. So it was like he lost his admin and his mom.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. So it was, I mean, like after hearing about like, okay, yeah, I get it, but still you gotta do your job.
So my follow-up question would be, were they on a 3-year contract with him?
No.
So it couldn't have been a position where he said, I apologize, I have things going on in my life, but I really can't be your property manager at this time.
That might have been the responsible thing to do.
Which again would be tough. I get it. It's income that's being generated for him. But again, for 2 years, that's neglect. So.
Okay.
Just
don't mince your words. Tell them how you feel.
just based on, I don't know all the details.
Right.
But just everyone's hearing what I just did. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, so going back to your story. So you bought in 2018, you
2015.
said? 2015.
Yeah.
So you got on the board immediately or a few years after?
I think after about a year.
Okay. And then you were just a board member.
Correct.
And then you became treasurer like?
Pretty soon after, I think.
Okay.
Definitely within that first year of me being on it.
Okay. So you were treasurer for a couple of years. And then I remember they just made you president when I came on or when I was around.
I think I was, let me think about this. I think I was treasurer for like 3 years and then president for like a year and a half.
Okay.
And then I stopped.
Okay. And you were on the board with, like, after I was there for about a year and a half. So.
Yeah.
So that aligns. So your first experience with me was actually with my tenant, who is right outside your window. Do you remember that whole fiasco?
Vaguely. Because the lower unit, but which fiasco? Over the last 8 years, there have been a handful.
So the one that she was just throwing parties and having a bunch of people over and doing all sorts of shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's coming back.
Okay. So can you describe, because Heather had like front row seats to this, this, epic, story. So what, from your perspective, what was going on up there? Because at this point, you didn't know me, you didn't know anything. You just knew that this tenant was running amok. So like, what were some of the things you were seeing going on?
I'm really trying to remember, but it was just like, so when you have a lot of people over, and obviously when you're renting or owning, whichever, you're allowed to have people over, right?
Right.
But from what I recall, it was a lot of people where it's like, this is a 700 square foot roughly place. How do you fit 15 people? Or we also have a parking issue, so that didn't help anything. But also when you're outside, everything's just echoing over everyone.
Right.
And between that, I think a few times like people drove up on the lawn or something, and it's just kind of, you try to be respectful of everyone, and we all come home after a long day of work. Like, we're not trying to see a ton of people we don't know that took our parking spot that are being loud every Saturday.
Right. Yeah. And it's okay. I mean, it's okay to, you don't have to like tone it down because it was my tenants.
I'm trying to genuinely remember, because how long ago was that?
It was probably 4 years ago.
Yeah.
3-4 years ago. Yeah. I just remember.
We have fresh nuisance.
Fresher issues.
I mean,
yes.
I had one in my own building.
Yes, that's true.
Yes,
that consumed your thought process for years.
Yes. Why? What do you recall that I'm leaving out?
No, from what I heard, it was pretty bad. At least from some of the owners over in 7. She used to call my tenant the Puerto Rican princess, but like she's also super racist.
Yeah.
And didn't know I'm Puerto Rican, but it's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But,
not something I would say, but okay.
Yeah, no, but
just princess works.
Yeah, no, I can give you stories of other stuff she said, but we're not going to go in there.
Yeah.
But I remember getting sent one picture where it was just like her dragging a trash bag across the lawn and just like kids' toys and like the trash is falling out and just a complete mess.
I do vaguely remember someone dragging, or just like it was ripping when they were tossing it, and it just was like,
yeah.
Again, this is shared space.
Pull it together.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
So it's interesting because the people in that building were having a really tough time with her. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time the previous property manager put a complaint in. You have to understand, every time I met with her, Kayla and I, she was like super nice, respectful. Mm-hmm. Everything was put together. She knew we were coming. Mm-hmm. But like, everything was, and she was always super common. She was never paying on time or never in full. She'd send me like Venmos for like $4.83 and then $7.95 and then like $432. So it was weird, but it was also my first tenant. It was my first like real rental property, right?
And, it was probably too where you were happy to provide a home for her,
Yeah, and she had like, the story, she's coming from abusive relationships. She's from Waterbury. Her mom trashed her credit, like all this stuff.
And those are real things.
Those are real things.
Yeah.
And she's single, trying to make it on her own, working at Walmart down the street. I'm like, okay, we're going to give her. So when the complaints started coming in, my first reaction was to defend her. Like, is it...
Well, good.
Yeah. Is this a bunch of like old white ladies from Cromwell that doesn't like the way she looks, right? Like... It could be.
Because it happens.
It happens.
Yeah.
And then so I get the first complaint from Brian and like I push back. I said, all right, I'll talk to her. And she goes, no, we don't make any noise. We're super quiet, blah, blah, blah. So then I get the call to the hearing that you guys are calling me to a hearing. And I imagine, so the reason why I ask you is because like you're front row seats to this and you're on the board. So I wasn't sure if.
I'll be honest, I don't fully remember.
Okay.
But on the board, you have to take complaints seriously.
Yeah.
However, unless it's something like really outlandish where it's like, let's do a hearing right now, I don't think we ever did a hearing where it's like one single person made one single complaint and we did a hearing.
Right.
So it would have been repeat offender, said from multiple people, because that's the other piece. If someone just didn't like her and kept saying it every day, that still doesn't mean it's happening. So it would have had to be multiple times from multiple people to have the hearing. So legitimately.
Yeah. No, I get it. And so I ended up calling Brian. I said, hey, listen, can you put me in touch with these people who are making the complaints? Like, are they reasonable people? Are they sane people? And so he's like, I can't just give it to you. Let me call around. And he got permission. He gave me their numbers and I start calling around and it's like everybody in the building. And it's all the time. Like it's been going on incessantly for the previous 4 months.
Which is embarrassing for you.
Yeah.
To a degree, right?
Right. And I'm like, and so, I just had the one little complaint like 2 months prior. And now it's like, okay, I'm getting called to a hearing and I'm coming to find out that it's like valid. Like, so I start the eviction process and I go in to check in her unit one time because they're saying there's multiple people in there, there's animals, there's all this stuff. And like our lease agreement is strict.
They definitely had dogs.
Right.
Yeah, that I remember.
And our lease agreement, there's no pets. No pets, no family, no friends, no nothing.
Well, I think, didn't she say she was like dog sitting or something?
Yeah.
Like for how long?
Right.
You're a great friend.
Yeah. And that, like you adopted the dog.
Yeah.
So I go in there like towards the end and like there's two like giant speakers, like speakers as tall as me, 6 foot tall speakers, like from, that you would put up at a concert in her 640 square foot unit.
Okay.
And I'm like,
but she never turned them on. So.
Oh yeah, they weren't plugged in. Right. And I'm starting to talk to the neighbors are like, they're just desperate. They're desperate. Like people are losing tenants. And I'm like, why am I just hearing about like, nobody's conveyed to me the severity of this issue. It was like two in passing things.
So, and I wonder though, at that level, if they were all going to the property manager's office and then how many actually got back to the board. Because no one's calling the board.
No, and that was, I think, part of my initial issue was that everybody said they'd been making these complaints to the management company for months.
Yeah. Well, there was also a woman in the office that was just...
not responsive.
She was the first quiet quitter.
Oh.
She just like, that term now, but she just... she actually laughed at me at one point. And
really?
I thought that was really interesting.
Why did she laugh at you?
Because smoke was getting into my unit.
Oh.
And I said, is there anything that I can do? Because when people own the unit, like there's nothing to say they can't smoke inside, but it shouldn't be getting into my unit. And you know how it's getting into my unit. But she laughed and said, oh, well, I can knock on the neighbor's door and ask them to stop. And I said, seriously? She's like, yeah, or you can get one of those like whole house air purifiers. Like, who's paying for that? Those are like $600 for like a good one.
Right.
So, but she thought it was funny. It's like, okay, that was one of the first ones where it's like, okay, this property management company is not taking care in the way that I would think one would.
Right. Yeah. And that I think was my concern coming on as well, was that you guys just weren't getting the attention, or we were, and we had like standing water every time it rained in that building. And
yeah, it was all kinds of problems. And then it was like, well, we don't have the money, which might be the case. However, what contracts or contractors were we using to rectify those issues? And a lot of times, too, it was like someone in-house or someone like way overpaid.
Right. Paying $4,000 to put fans in and dry it out and not do anything else.
Yeah, and just like keep having a Band-Aid. It was a lot of Band-Aids. That's the biggest thing I learned when combing through everything. Right. And in certain situations, that makes sense, but not for water damage. Like that's a major problem.
Not when there's black mold 4 feet up the walls.
Yeah.
Throughout all the storage units and across the whole basement where people live.
Yeah, but we also, like you said, not getting enough attention. They had much larger complexes. So I think it was just kind of like, here's this 1971 built complex with 56 units.
Right.
We weren't like a Branford money 100 plus unit.
Right. And the manager, that's what he was managing mostly. He had like 1,000 units under management.
Yeah. So when you think about that, you can't really fault his performance necessarily because his own company is not setting him up for success.
Right.
So, yeah, just wasn't great.
Yeah. And so it was kind of from that so I come on the board, and we had a pretty productive board for a few months.
I think so.
And then, so what was the next kind of piece of your recollection of how kind of things transpired?
As far as you coming on?
As far as like once so just to recap, we had that annual meeting where I think they made you president, and there was like 4 people there, 5.
Yeah.
It was the 3 board members. With 4 vacancies on the board.
Yeah, we didn't even have enough people to like make a legitimate vote.
It was a 7-member board, and there was 3 board members. And at the meeting, it was me and then that lady from 6, who the landscapers had broken her window, and it had been like 3 years and nobody had ever fixed it.
Yeah.
And so she just kind of went off on a tangent and yelled at everybody for 10 minutes.
Oh my God, I forgot
You remember
about that. Yeah, that was not productive because it took up so much time. I mean, I fully understood her emotion around it. It was just not the place.
Right.
But I think maybe she felt it was the place because she'd think people would finally hear her outside of the property management company. But unfortunately, only like 3 people heard her.
Yeah, it was just
no one goes.
You guys, me and her and the property manager. And so she like laid into everybody for like 10 minutes and then just left.
Yes.
And you know what the funny thing is? Like, I thought when I got more involved, like she'd be like my biggest nightmare. She's actually been great. I've never heard a peep from her since.
Well, once, because didn't it get fixed? Or
she paid to fix it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing. You see, like we saw her at the end of her emotion.
Right.
We didn't see her be completely civil and normal for,
years.
15 complaints.
Right.
So it was just unfortunate that for fresh eyes, it's like, whoa, lady, like, okay, we understand your window's broken. But for someone that's been trying to advocate for herself unsuccessfully for years, I get it.
Yeah. And that was my first experience of the board. It was like that.
Welcome.
And then you guys were like, so we've got 4 vacancies. Does anybody want to be on the board? I was like, sure. And they're like, okay, you're on. And that was it.
Well, so that's another struggle, right?
Yeah.
And I keep wanting to say nothing bad about the board members. These are normal people.
Right.
For free, taking this on. And by the way, it's very thankless. You have people stopping you for weird things like, it was like 7 a.m. on a Sunday, and someone was asking me about their car tags. I'm like, I'm not the person. It's the property management company, but I'll pass it along, Yeah. But just no one wanted to do it. And I kind of get it because there's really no incentive other than to have some form of control over certain decisions. But outside of that, you're expecting these people to care enough to spend their time on something, and they'd rather just someone else take care of it.
Right.
And so think about that. We have 56 units, so we probably have like 70 plus adults, let's say.
Right.
Annual meetings, we get what? Top out at 15 max. I mean, right around there.
Right.
Under 20.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that, though? Like, if you're a board member or even a property manager, where do you go from there? Because you have people complaining about things that are getting done or are not getting done. But then when it's time for them to speak up once a year, they can't even do it. So,
Yeah. That was an annual meeting I went to.
Yeah. And
There was 4 or 5 people.
I mean, granted, that wasn't that like COVID or something? I'm trying to remember.
No, it was pre-COVID.
Or like during the winter
It was
whatever. Yeah.
It was during the winter. It was cold.
Well, it almost snowed. I don't know.
Yeah. Something. There was something going on that night.
Yeah.
And so that was, I mean, it was good. So I think now's a good time so you can tell people a little bit about what you do for work and kind of why you are were well suited for the role that you were in on the board.
Oh, well, treasurer specific, I just love personal finance and finance. But right now I'm a branch manager. I work in the electrical industry. So as a branch manager, I'm also reading contracts a lot more now, especially just dealing with different people, just understanding kind of facility maintenance to a degree, and just being responsible for overall happiness of people, knowing where a dollar should go, like what makes sense. So I definitely hone that in, but I think that the board also helped me at work as well.
Okay.
Just because it's just more exposure to looking at things, picking contractors, understanding if I'm not an expert in whatever, like building a deck, right?
Right.
I'm trusting that the contractor is telling me the right thing, giving me the right quote, whatever.
Right.
But now I'm much more refined in kind of, well, hopefully, knock on wood, but hopefully I'm just choosing the right people and kind of seeing through the fluff or the BS and just picking people. So the other thing is, if it's not apparent on this podcast, I'm very honest and just kind of off the cuff. So to me, it was a shakeup for the board a little bit. And just coming from a younger perspective, a lot of people on the board had been on the board for a long time, and there's a lot of good things around that. But it also means not having fresh ideas potentially, or just like seeing a new perspective of someone that's brand new to the situation to say like, hey, is this normal, or is this what you guys always do, or that kind of thing. So
Yeah. And
did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think they really appreciate that as well, because, they kept saying she's well suited to be the president. They wanted to give you more responsibility.
And I think I wasn't afraid to push back. So that's the other thing too. When you have people that have been on the board forever, that have lived together or dealt with each other forever, I don't want to say fear, but you have some discomfort around conflict.
Right.
And I'm not conflict averse. And by that, I do not mean argumentative, because we've had those people as well. But it just kind of means, hey, like this doesn't really make sense. Or you have two people arguing about something and it's like, all right, let's take a step back. I think this is what they're saying. I think this is what this other person's saying. Let's come to an agreement so that this doesn't totally derail.
Right.
So.
And that's huge. I mean, that's a lot of what that position requires.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because, you've dealt with multiple people, and some are great to have and some just are disruptive. That's the best word for it. You're trying to get stuff done in about an hour of time, and it needs to be efficient.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. So then the other two board members, as you alluded to, had been there for forever. They weren't super active. Mm-hmm. I feel like from my lens, once I came on, I felt like you and I were the most active on the board.
Yeah.
As far as making decisions. And this is a part where, again, it's kind of fuzzy because I spent so much of my mental space throughout that time thinking about this. Mm-hmm. But at some point, I think I pitched to you like, hey, listen, like, what if I just manage it now?
Yeah.
But I've never heard. So from your perspective, what did that look like, and kind of what was your thought process? Because I know there was a lot of factors that went into, hey, is this really a good decision or not? And a lot of conversations, many of which I wasn't there for. So, just from your perspective, how did that come about, and why did you guys, what led to that decision ultimately being made with the limited information you had then? Because there was definitely a high likelihood that I could have blown up the whole thing.
Oh, yes. So from what I remember, I think at that point we knew the property management company we had was not working. And I think in the past, some board members had, presented some other possible property managers. And we did look at those people, by the way, as well as you. I think, though, that at least for me, and it was limited interaction, but it seemed that you definitely cared. Seemed like you knew what you were looking at. And if you knew what you were looking at, hopefully you would know where improvement could be made. And I think there was definitely caution around it.
Right.
Understandably, just because there wasn't even anything to look at reviews on you or anything like that. So looking back, it's kind of crazy that the decision was made. But I don't know. For me, again, like I said before, I'm usually good at reading people at this point and kind of understanding if this will go sideways or not. And I know that originally we made it so that you were only 1 year.
1 year with a 60-day out at any given time.
Yeah. So we had to put those stipulations in for people to feel comfortable.
Right.
Which normally those are not the parameters correct? I mean, it's usually 3-year contracts.
Yeah, but you know what? I've kept all those parameters in all my contracts.
Yeah.
And
that's because you know that it'll, you'll show up.
Right.
So that's the thing. I mean, people that know that they're confident in their ability, they're fine writing those things in because they don't expect anyone to have an issue. And quite honestly, the few people who might, they're probably people you want to part with anyways.
Right.
So yeah, just looking back, it was definitely, it was a gamble, but it paid off. I mean, how long has it been again? 3 years, 4 years?
Yeah, I think 3 or 4 years. I don't know.
Right around there.
It all blurs together at a certain point.
It does.
But yeah, so then, and that's kind of my experience of it as well, was I know it was kind of like a huge swing for the fence because I was but at the same.
Well, for you too, right? Because you had never done it.
I'd never done. I was a homeopath.
Well, okay, really selling yourself here.
I know.
But I think part of it was just we need someone that cares and is paying attention. Those were the two big things that even if you slipped up somewhere, we knew that since it seemed like you cared, you would rectify it, and own up.
Right.
And just make sure it got done in whatever way it was necessary. So, I mean, you didn't have a background in it. No. What you did have knowledge around was, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, has nothing to do with property management, right?
Well, yes and no. The short answer is no, but as I've learned, I learned a lot about dealing with people and understanding people and just being able to navigate people's weird personalities.
Which is a big thing.
It's a huge thing. Yeah. So actually it surprisingly set me, those skills transferred a lot better than I expected them to.
Okay.
So, just because dealing with, in the world of naturopathy, homeopathy, our goal is to find imbalances in people and then fix them.
Okay.
But at the fundamentally, we're just trying to understand in what ways people are imbalanced, and usually it relates to all these other things, and you tailor how you treat someone based on their particular setup, disposition.
And that could be the same for property management to some extent as well. If you're taking on a new property, maybe it's not financial issues. Maybe they have plenty of money, but they don't have the right contractors in place, or they don't have people that are making decisions that really make sense. Maybe it was a previous management company that took money from them. Maybe it's just a building like where I live where you just need a lot of maintenance based on when it was built.
Right.
So each property, you're going to have like a baseline of things that are all the same, really, but you never know what you're going to uncover or what you're taking over based on what the other management company was doing. So
no, 100%. And I think you hit the nail on the head with like what you guys were looking for was just someone who's going to be responsive and who cared.
Yeah, I mean, we knew we had financial issues, right?
Right.
Well, as far as just not having money at the end.
Right.
But I think we just thought that if someone was attentive and cared about what was going on, that the financial piece would just kind of find its way to a better level with that care.
Right. Which, and I think it had, I mean,
oh yeah.
Fortunately, even though my background was in, alternative medicine, I had a business in that. So I understood some fundamental business concepts and revenue and like how we have to make more than we're spending, like super basic stuff like that. Right. And I had been on a personal finance journey as well at that time, which is what led me into real estate investing and buying properties and rentals and stuff like that. So
you got it to begin with.
Right. So I had like a slant towards the business side of things, but there was no evidence to support that I could manage a condo complex. There was none.
It's true. Well, and too, there were people concerned, people who were not on the board, who spoke up and were like, "Are you serious?"
Right.
And that was tough for me too, because I thought, I mean, I am serious, but am I 100% confident in this? No, but mostly. Yeah. And to me, it was to the point where it's like, okay, 1 year, yes, you can definitely mess things up in 1 year, but worse than it was already, it's just kind of like, if we really need to step in, I think let's say this, I think I also had confidence in myself, where if you were like really messing it up, we would have ways to make it
go, to make you disappear.
Well, yeah, just, if you really botch something up, I think I was just confident that in myself, or just like knowing people that I can kind of rope in and network with that would
help
fix it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. I'm glad you guys didn't have to do that.
Yeah, me too.
So then we come on board. You guys take the risk, right? And what were some of the first changes that happened that started to indicate like this might have been the right decision?
Well, I think that so first off, if you have any kind of transition in management, not only in condos, but like anywhere, jobs, I think a lot of people take that opportunity to speak up because they're like, oh, it's someone new, so I haven't complained to them yet. So I think one of the biggest things was that people felt that you were responsive and, didn't brush them off and were actually listening to the concerns that they had. So addressing a lot of those things, obviously within reason, it kind of depended on what it was, but also just having a clear plan around our money and way more transparency around how it was spent. So, because I kicked back stuff for you.
Yeah.
And it was minor things, but when you have, so the board represents everyone.
Yeah.
So if an invoice says something like, oh, we fixed that walkway, it's like, well, which one? So It doesn't mean it wasn't fixed. It just means to me, if someone's doing a good job, they're saying, no, you need to tell us which one, because that also means if we install something new and then in a year's time it goes bad, that's something where we can go back to the contractor, back to the manufacturer, whatever it is, and kind of kick back. So I got off track there. But it was just visual things and people, I think, just feeling heard. And then when we had that, the website that we still use, that's another thing. I think a lot of people want transparency and they want things to be organized and understand what's going on. And those are all valid feelings. And I think you brought that to our association because, it's drastically better.
Thanks. And a lot of that was just like, I didn't have a software that I was using. So, I think a lot of the stuff that we see in property management now from, it's just like companies who've been around for a while, all just doing things the same way they've always done them.
Oh yeah. And no one's questioning it.
And they're so slammed with work and like there's such a high demand. Like they don't really have the time to go look at their processes and try to make them better. It's just like they're barely skating by as it is, and they're just trying to just cram it all into the same systems that they've always been using. So what was nice, I think part of the competitive advantage we had was just we were brand new and we had no experience in property management. We had no experience with other management companies. We never saw their process. I just had to figure it out.
Right.
So when I was looking for a software, I was able to look at 6-7 different softwares because I knew that was going to be one of the biggest things because it's the one thing that you interact with every day.
Yeah.
Right? We all do. And I needed something that was going to be as streamlined and intuitive as possible that new people who aren't tech savvy can get on. And I know the previous management company had some kind of electronic platform, but it was super clunky and super basic. And
from what I remember, it was only board member accessible though, right?
No, I could go on to pay my dues.
Oh, okay.
But that was it.
I think I just had mine in auto draft.
Okay.
So.
Got it. Yeah. And we, but even in our software, there's permissions, like the board has expanded permissions versus,
Yeah, I remember.
But I think that it streamlines that. Like I remember it had a maintenance request tab, I think, but I don't think anybody ever checked it.
No, I never went on it.
Really? And you guys didn't get online maintenance requests before through that system or anything like that?
I don't think so. I think the only things that I ever looked at were invoices.
Okay.
And then I looked through to see invoices that I had to approve, ones that I already did approve, that kind of thing. So that's why I thought it was just board member specific. But the maintenance thing too, it's not just to streamline that. It's a receipt to go back and say, we already did that. So why is it a problem again?
Right.
And to have that track record
which you like to use. No, but good reason, right? It's like, rather than just put in a new ticket, she gets to go back and open the old ticket that still's not fixed.
Yeah. The same way I write emails at work, I am finding that chain.
Right.
So everything is together. Don't tell me it's not.
Right.
But again, it's great for you guys too, because you can say, yeah, we did do that. So if it's coming back up as an issue again, is there someone else or were there other people involved that we can go back to and say, hey, you need to come fix this? Like when my building had all the valves replaced, if something goes wrong with those, you say, hey, plumber, you came here 6 months ago.
Right.
Why am I looking at this again? And it's just, it's good to show all the things that have been completed, but it's just good to just have the receipts.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time, because I have to train, every time we get a new complex, I've got to train them to use the system.
Okay.
And no, put a ticket in, pay HOA. I shouldn't really even say the name of the software. Bleep that out. Put a ticket in the system, right? Put a ticket in, and they're texting, they're calling. I'm so glad that I got a work phone. that I can give to my assistant, and she has it. So the people can still text, but like her response most of the time is like, okay, put it in the system, make a ticket, make a general request, make a maintenance request, because that's, like you said, your receipt, right? So that also gets CC'd to the whole board. So when someone puts in a maintenance request, as I get the request, at the very same time, my admin gets it, my maintenance guy gets it, and the entire board gets it.
Oh, good.
And then when I put a comment on that request, I can select to notify, and I can notify the person who made the request, and I can notify any one of my staff or the board if I feel it's necessary for them to be notified of this response that I'm putting back in. And even if I don't notify them, the board has permissions to go in and check up on it whenever they want, right? Through their own portal.
Yeah.
So, they can go and make sure that we're being accountable. Like, if someone puts in a request, they don't hear anything about it for 3 months. They can go and check the ticket and find out, oh, okay, this was resolved on this date.
Yeah.
Good. Or Jared hasn't responded to it yet. What's going on? Right? And it's part of just accountability all around, and just making sure that we're doing our job, and everybody's really, everybody's in the loop, and everybody has full transparency with regards to that.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. And now the only issue is that we've gotten to the point where I get because of just the volume of associations, we get 15 requests in a day. And someone's got to respond to all those.
Yeah. That's a full-time job.
Right. And fortunately, it's not my full-time job, but I get the emails still, and it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if there's a way to filter them in such a way where, are any of them ever repetitive?
Yes.
From the same board?
Yeah. I had one guy, a new board member, was still trying to figure out the system, and he clicked, because he has wider permissions. So he clicked every unit in the building and then submitted his maintenance request. And so we got 6 at the same time for the same thing.
Nice.
The lights are out, right? And then we're not just the parking lot lights, not everybody's electricity, right? And so I just see request. It's like a Sunday, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on?
Mayhem.
And it turns out it was just one guy who clicked everybody's unit and said, lights are out.
Well, now you definitely knew.
I definitely knew. And then I talked to him, and then he got a little salty because I talked to him, and I'm like, I just focused on, rather than talking about the lights that were out, which were important to him, I was like, don't do that. Don't send me 6 requests at a time, please. Yeah. And I had to go back and apologize to him later, because I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just a little overwhelmed. Yeah. But so other changes that happened that in that first year that you felt were positive changes?
Ones I haven't mentioned?
Yeah. Well, okay. So we started off just managing. Yeah. And then what was the next thing we started doing? And why did we start doing that?
Was it the landscaping?
Landscaping and snow.
And plowing, yeah. Well, that was another thing. So again, you're trusting the property management people to select contractors that are not only good at their job, but also the quote makes sense. And so, I mean, for anyone that might be listening that's like a landscaper or just plowing, I get it. There's a liability, pay a lot of insurance. It's not a cheap thing. However, the complex is so small that contract was sizable from what I remember.
It is a sizable contract, but
no, before you took over.
Oh yeah.
The other people, it was a lot.
Oh, I mean, no, I understand.
Yeah.
But so even though the complex is unit small, from a landscaping snow removal perspective, it's a huge property. Okay. For the amount of property per the amount of units is pretty crazy.
It was a sizable contract, and so apparently it's legitimate, and that's fine. But for that amount of money, it wasn't a smooth process. No. It was an issue. Right. And it's tricky, right? I mean, you're relying on 56 residents to move their freaking car.
Right.
But now we have a process, and it's been drastically better. But people have been calling for that for years,
Right.
and it just wasn't happening.
Right. And that's that was one of the things that, like, I thought was going to be our huge competitive advantage, was like, and because I didn't have anything else going on, like it was the only property, so I could spend early on like my whole time there.
Oh yeah.
And I looked at, I think it was like $36,000 contract, which, just to put it in perspective, like I've requoted it a few times, and the quotes come in anywhere from like 40 to 60,000.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely gone up, and part of that is just the cost of what's being used, and
there's a lot of grass and like a lot of little parking lots and nowhere to. Well, I mean, there's places to put this.
Well, the grass is definitely a pain.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah,
it's the salting
and the trees. You have no idea. Like if it was
those
that much grass.
Damn acorn dropping trees.
Yes, because you have to weed whack around each one of them, and there's like a gazillion trees on the property. Like not like it's not like lines. There are lines of woods, but there's so many like trees that are like featured in the property. And I only say this because I did the landscaping myself for like a year and a half to 2 years, and weed whacking that property was the biggest pain. Like, cause you're just, you're exhausted. It's a whole day event. It's and you're just sitting there weed whacking all these trees, and there's 7 different buildings, and you're like, there's all these different little features and stuff sticking out of the ground, and the grass isn't like even that nice. So you just have these little,
very intricate.
Yeah. So after doing the job for a few years, I'm like, I can see why.
You understood why the contract was what it was.
And I give you guys like a 30% discount the first year. I was like, because we're going to bundle it. We're going to do the management. We're going to And it was great. It was a win-win because they got, service. I think, I'm not going to say better, but presumably, right? The goal was better service at a big discount. And I was able to learn a lot because I had the bandwidth and I had the ambition to go do that. But I learned, like, part of that discounted rate was it was like my training ground, right?
Yeah.
I got to figure out what worked, what didn't work, like how to actually do the job. And now that I'm not out there mowing lawns anymore, when I go to bid jobs or meet with contractors to get bids, I empathize with them. Like I understand the actual scope of the work because I've done that job.
Yeah.
I had this property. I know what goes into it.
Well, and that's the thing. So maybe the other people where landscaping was their job, like they're full on.
Right.
They just looked at it and they were like, I know how much this is going to be.
Right.
Just because they have that eye because they've done it.
Right.
So.
And that's one that a number of contractors actually got a little scared and like bid that one super high.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But my theory with all of that was you have this whole top of the hill, and they're all just different phases of the same association with different boards, different landscapers, different snow removal, different trash contracts, different, like, they're all like right next to each other. They all look the same.
Yeah.
Just get one contractor to do them all and save money.
Yeah. I guess the only tricky part would be making sure that each board or each association, I should say, actually paid their.
Right.
That was a fear because we talked about that multiple times where it was like, why do we have different landscaping? Why do we even have different trash removal? They're using the same entrance and exit.
Yeah.
Let's work together.
I don't even know why they have 3 different boards.
If we added, I don't even know how many units are in each. Another 20 or something?
112 total. So 28, 28, and 56.
So, 112 is pretty sizable.
Yeah, you could take advantage of some serious economies of scale with that.
Yeah. But you also it's also a lot of people where you're trusting, again, the right property manager, and making sure that people are working together to get contracts that make sense.
Yeah, but they're all using me now anyways.
Well, there you go.
So that was the original vision. It was like, why is everybody using 3 people? Like, why can't we get this? And I remember bringing that to the board, and talking to the other associate, and they were like, that's impossible. That's never going to happen. Like these people have there was feuding between the phases for like 20 years.
So that's the other piece though, is when you have people that have been there forever, that's great in the same way that it's not.
Right.
And there's all this drama that comes around these things. It's like, I thought we were talking about like door color paint. Like why are we talking about what happened 15 years ago, like with your nephew? So.
That's so true.
But sure.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, that's, and that's, that was key. And I think a part of it was just once we got the ball rolling, because it was really my only focus for a year or so. Well,
For the most part.
Yeah. I mean, I think it went a long way with ownership that first year.
Yeah.
When I was the property manager, but they also saw me out there doing the landscaping, and they saw me out there doing the maintenance work myself.
And I think people you would be willing to talk with people.
Build relationships.
Which, again, is fantastic, but realistically, eventually, you can't spend your time that way. So maybe it was a little bit of being spoiled and then coming back to reality for people where it's like you can't be 24/7 accessible. And quite honestly, I mean, even when I see you on property, I usually just kind of wave. And if you're walking toward me, I know you're trying to talk about something, but
right.
I'm not trying to bother you and like use up your time and, every single time that I see you. Whereas some people will use that opportunity to, be in your ear, and then something that should have lasted like an hour for you on property is now an hour and a half, which then you're taking away from another property. So.
Right. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And fortunately, I think the relationships piece of it though is actually one of the biggest pieces.
Yeah.
And just getting to know people and understanding, and I feel like with the newer properties, at that property, in our first 4 properties, I knew every single unit owner by name. I knew what they looked like. I knew what kind of car they drive. I knew their preferences.
Creepy.
Well, no, it's fair. But it was super helpful because it let me do my job better, right? Like I know that she's super picky about shoveling of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And if I don't shovel this perfectly, she's going to have a conniption, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, think about it too. If you're a server and you're remembered, people just feel nice. Yeah. You're like, oh, they remembered my name. It feels more personal. It's a more caring relationship. So it's smart.
Yeah. And I think that so many associations I think that this is kind of why I think that smaller associations should self-manage, because you have a management company with the rates to be competitive for what we charge for management. So for that 56 unit, the previous management company was charging $16,000 a year. I think when we came on, we dropped it to 13 or 14 or something like that. It was,
It was a little off, yeah.
But if you think about that, it's a little over $1,000 a month, right? And I've looked back at this, how many hours we put in and how much time and bandwidth and getting yelled at we do for that $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And it's and then you have your overhead and all the other stuff that goes along with running a business. The margins aren't great. So I understand why these big companies have 1,000 units under management per manager. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that you can't do a good job doing that kind of volume.
No.
And if you're a smaller association, you can't really get that value when you're competing against these other complexes that have just bigger contracts and more money thrown out.
Yeah, they won't be valued ever unless it was a property manager where they're near retirement, they don't fully want to go on, but they don't need to chase multiple contracts. That's pretty much the only situation where
it could be good.
They would be, yeah.
Yeah. And but I mean there's so much benefit. I think that if you could find one person that could do most of it, that could do a little bit of handyman stuff, that can change light bulbs for less than electrician rates, right? That can do a little bit of landscaping, do a little bit of weeding, and get to know people. And getting to know people is like half the battle with the management component. Like the administrative stuff you can learn, the legal stuff you can talk to your attorney, the accounting stuff you can check with your accountant. But a lot of it is just, it's pretty intuitive stuff. But if you can find one person or one or two people to take care of a smaller complex, you're going to get so much better value and so much better of an experience, because it's one person who's really invested in all aspects, or even a board. Like if the board takes over and self-manages, they can be really involved in all aspects of it. Whereas it's difficult when you're just a small association amidst all the other complexes, right?
And the 56 units, that was small.
That was small.
For our property manager, yeah.
It was very small. And now, at least since the whole hill is under one roof, it's like, okay, now it's 112 units out of my 600 or 700, right? So it's like, you guys are still prioritized.
Yeah, we're like a big percentage of the whole.
And we've started to take on other properties that are really close to you guys. So it's like we just kind of handle everyone together.
Yeah.
Right. But I remember, one of the biggest pieces from starting out, we got referred another association within like 6 months. We signed on with them. And the thing that did it was because I made the change of management letter, and I went and I knocked on everybody's door.
Okay.
And I said, I'm going to be their new property manager. I'm Jared. And I talked to everybody. If they were home, I talked to them. I chatted. I found out what they wanted, like what they liked, like what were they unhappy with, what did they want to see changed. And one guy who was a mailman up in Hartford liked that so much that when he heard that this complex that he delivered the mail to was looking for a new property manager and everything they went through, he was like,
He gave your name, yeah.
I was like, I know a guy.
Yeah.
And I went from not wanting to be in property management, not even wanting to shut down my other business. Like I thought I was going to do this as a side gig. It was to protect my investment because I thought I was going to lose all my money on this condo that I bought. I was like, it's, and then it, quickly, once you added the landscaping, once you added the maintenance stuff and all the carpentry that needed to be done there that I knew a little bit about. And then one more property, it was like, okay, I'm not making a ton of money doing natural medicine. Maybe I should take a real look at this, because I have no experience in this. I had no business getting into this. And apparently I'm doing it okay enough where other people want me to do it for them.
Yeah.
And that kind of started the snowball, and it's continued on in that sense because, sadly, the competition is not stiff in this sector.
It was really fun. It was just the other day. I think it was like a commercial, I want to say, but it said, no one is happy with their property manager. And I laughed out loud because truly, I've never heard anyone talk about their property manager and like them until now.
Oh,
but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
previously.
Yeah, right.
Or, even my stepmom is battling that right now at her complex. And it's just really unfortunate because, again, I don't want to say a lot of money, but we pay a monthly fee into it.
Yeah.
And people work hard for their money. And it's really disheartening when you uncover some stuff where it's like, this happened and all these people paid in $300, $500, whatever it is. How are we in this position right now?
Right.
Like, what went wrong? How long has it been going wrong? And I even told her, I said, listen, I think that you'd be really good at digging in, but do you really want to do that? Because what you already know is like the tip of the iceberg, right? So yeah, maybe you'll uncover a bunch of stuff, but that's the unfortunate reality, is that I think so many people are unhappy with their management company. They're not sure where the money is going, but they don't know enough to really dig in, or whatever the case is. And it just rides like that for years. And if you have the same property management and you have the same people on the board, who needs to be in that shuffle to ask a question?
Right.
And that's not really happening because no one wants to be on the board, as we've already said. It's, struggling to get 7 people out of 70 adults. It's pretty sad.
Right.
So it's just the same people over and over, and they can only do as much as they can. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah. And tell me a little more about that. Cause like, I know it's interesting because since your foray into this, your dad, I remember talking to your dad back when he was like finishing up his career and like was dabbling in like maybe doing some carpentry or repair work or whatever, and ended up going to work for another management company. You have other family members who are in condo complexes.
Yeah.
So, you've had a unique perspective of the HOA management landscape. And I'm sure that information trickles down to you, and kind of what has been your general consensus of what's going on without naming names of other management companies or people.
Going on as far as what?
Just like how like I've never seen under the hood of another management company.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Your dad worked for one for a decent period of time.
Right.
And, again, this isn't to badmouth another company or whatever. It's just to say we have a client from that company.
Gotcha.
And all I know is what they tell me about what went on with their experience with that company, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know what goes like. I understand that there's people out there that they have pain points with us, and their perspective is probably pretty negative of us, right? But I also know what goes on behind the scenes for us, and that we're really trying hard.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the theme across companies or if it's just like, other people just don't care, but it always seems like what you're saying, people are unhappy with their management company, and the perspective from the people who are getting the services rendered is like they don't care about us or anybody, and they're just taking our money. And
well, honestly, I didn't really talk too much about my dad as far as like feedback from people. So from his perspective, it was more so just dealing with, it was like his boss would tell him, this came in, like, go fix it, basically.
Okay.
So it was like, if I put in a complaint or I put in a maintenance request, he wasn't seeing the maintenance request. He was just being told to go resolve it.
Got it.
So I really didn't gather a lot from that. As far as my stepmom is concerned and I have no idea what her property management company is or their name or anything, but it sounds like they've been doing some shadiness with just how they've spent their money and where it's gone and potentially contractors that were used. I mean, that one's a tricky one because I kind of told her, if the board approved whoever it was, then, is it really conflict of interest if it was approved? Now, if it was a situation where the property management said, hey, this person's going to be the roofer and the roofer is their son, that's a conflict of interest.
Right.
If it's their son and they presented a quote and the board chose his quote, that's not conflict of interest because they're approving it. They looked at the numbers. They did the right thing, looking at 3 different quotes, whatever. So, what I hear the most is mismanagement of money. That's probably the biggest thing. Or maybe it's just that, so people definitely feel unheard. They feel like they're not being attended to, but money is usually what makes people really mad. So it could be, it's so frustrating. My window is cracked and it's been cracked forever. Oh, but we had a $10,000 window budget and nothing came my way. Like that's usually when people start to really dig in and get upset.
Right.
So that's kind of been, I don't know if that was as much detail as you were hoping for, but.
No, that's good. So it sounds like the feedback you're getting from most people who are owning units in condos is that nobody's really responsive, but when things get shaken up, it's because, it's a money issue.
That's what it seems like. Yeah.
And
Because
money's missing, or that's the perception.
money is missing, or so if the budget was the same, so the $200,000 example earlier, if things are going exactly the same, it's sad that it happened, but people aren't really going to think about it. But you have an increase next year. Now people are wondering, why do I have an increase? Then people are willing to kind of dig in, and an increase is often legitimate. I mean, look at how much everything costs now. But again, it takes a financial change for people to say, hold on, like, does this actually make sense? And so when I've had an increase, as you know, and I understand why, but I also trust what's going on. If you had done something where I was questioning it and then we had an increase again, I'd be like, stop. Like, let me look at this. And I think that happened with my stepmom's association, and probably happened to a degree with our previous property manager.
Right.
Because other people outside of the board are now looking at it.
God, yes. Everybody's looking at it.
Correct.
And I've got 2 associations right now that their dues are going up substantially. One, because they did a reserve study and it's their newer complex, but it's like, okay, you need to fund for the next 30 years. Your complex is so far behind the 8 ball that it just doesn't make sense to do that, right? It's like we have a gazillion things that we need to take care of right now anyways.
Right.
It's good and bad, but state of Connecticut's going to start requiring them in like the next year or 2, FYI. But yes, but the nice thing is that you guys are finally paying off the special assessment, so you're going to have a little more flexibility in the budget without really going up too crazy on dues.
Yeah.
But I have other associations that they're trying to take out like 15-year loans for roofs, and I'm like, it's like, oh, because we can't, and their dues are like $250 right now, and I'm like, guys, you're hamstringing yourself for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
If unit owners can't afford a $320 HOA payment, I don't know, they can't afford to live here. I'm sorry. But it's like, you guys, how do I put it at the board meeting last night? I said, you guys have been stealing or taking from your future selves to maintain your HOA dues low, to keep your HOA dues low.
Yeah.
And you've been neglecting all your deferred maintenance at the expense of your future selves. And now your future selves are here.
Yeah. And you're just like, no, let's just kick it out again.
But you can't.
Yeah.
You have roof leaks in 3 different units. I mean, this is an association we just took over, right? Like, they have roof leaks in 3 different units, and, they and a number of other issues. And they're like, yeah, let's just, we want to keep our dues under 300. I'm like, you can't. You can't back yourself.
Also, that's like fairly arbitrary. Like, why 300?
It's because
that sounds nice, but and every time I say I might catch it. Anyways, at the end of the day, no one wants an increase. No one's gonna say, you know what? I don't like paying $250. Please take $320 instead. No one's going to say that.
Right.
But what they will say is, wow, this landscaping looks great. Wow, it's really nice to have a new walkway that I'm not like worried about walking on, or hey, it's not raining in my living room anymore. Those are great things.
Yeah.
So again, it's as long as it's backed, I'm never going to push back.
Right.
I'm pushing back if we've had an increase, had one. To me, I'd rather just rip the Band-Aid off. I'd rather jack it up $50 and call it for a couple years or however long, then it's 15 here, and then it's 20 here, and then it's another 15 here, and then because then you're in this cycle where I get why, right? You're just like slowly easing people into it. But to me, it's like, well, now you're setting the expectation that every single year it's going to go up, 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 up.
Yeah. And the reality is that it's going to.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part.
Well,
for the most part.
And especially, I think now, it's going to happen now only because once this law is changed and they pass the requirement of the reserve state, that's a big thing that people are talking about in Connecticut right now, because you have a lot of complexes that are 30 years old that have just never done their deferred maintenance.
Yeah.
And if you have to fully fund a reserve study, like you're going to see dues go from $300 a month to $900 a month.
That's crazy.
Right? Like now.
I hope that's not happening.
She's like, are you just breaking some news to me? No. But you know, A, it wouldn't happen overnight. B, at least for you guys, because we've been doing the right things by you, we have, like, even if that were to happen next year when we don't have the special assessment anymore or the loan payment, you guys are funding a good amount towards reserves at that point, and you're doing a lot of the capital repairs and upgrades that you need to do. But there's other associations who just simply aren't doing it. They're just simply just not. They're doing the bare minimum, and they don't have any extra money in their budget.
Yeah, that's tough. The only concern I would have, though, is what are the perks to owning a condo, right? It's not dealing with trash removal. It's not dealing with landscaping or plowing. I think I went over them.
It depends what condo complex you're in.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get like amenities.
I mean, some of those 55 plus condos they're nice.
Yeah, we just we're in the process of taking over one in Cromwell.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're standalone houses though.
Okay, yeah, so that's a little different.
Right, and they're like $500,000 each.
Yeah.
But they're super cheap too. They're fighting with their ownership about like putting money away for the road repaving.
But you don't cover their landscaping, right? Isn't that
Yeah, and it's a 55 plus. So
Okay.
everything's included, landscaping and all that stuff, yeah.
Because my friend is part of an HOA, but it's standalone homes. It's really just an HOA to make sure that everyone kind of upkeeps.
Follows the rules.
Yeah, so it's super low.
Yeah.
But my only concern would be, at what point does a monthly HOA really become valuable in not doing yard work?
Yeah.
Is that worth $600 a month? Because, I mean, my mortgage is like $700. So
Right.
You're doubling it.
Right.
So maybe that is worth it to people, and cool, good for you. Or you can just get a $1,400, which you can't get a $1,400 mortgage anymore.
Right.
But you know what I mean. So that's tricky.
It is. And, it's tough. I think we live in a society where people like the convenience of not having to deal with any of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're willing to pay whatever. I'll pay $600 a month. They'll pay double to get food DoorDash to them.
Well, that's the thing. We'll test. Connecticut is going to test how much people are willing to pay for that.
Oh, it's already in other states.
Is it?
Yeah, like a lot of like California, New Jersey.
California's
Right,
its own little.
But the problem becomes, and the reason why they're doing it makes sense, because what happens is, like, all right, let's say you guys have a bad management company and there's kickbacks or whatever from contractors, and you're paying too much for this work to be done. And now you take one special assessment, then you roll it into another special assessment loan, and then another one. And now your dues are going up so high that people just can't pay them. Mm-hmm. And you're end up foreclosing on it. Or it's just or it just gets deferred for so long that the cost to do it becomes $10 million because you're basically rebuilding the complex.
Right.
And then the complex goes bankrupt. I had an interview with a maintenance supervisor role. That's what we're looking to bring on. I don't know if you know anybody, but so he's at a complex in Hartford, 200 units, and
Wow.
Yeah, and their HOA dues are mid 700s, and they're looking at taking on another special assessment. And
Is it like an amazing?
No, They go for like 60,000. You can buy a unit for like 60 grand.
That is crazy.
And I'm like, is it like high end? Or are they not? He's like, no, it's all super rundown. And the problem is that they're getting to the point where, like, at a certain point, you just go bankrupt. At a certain point, you just don't have the money
Yeah.
to do it. And it's like, okay, now, and so this is what's so important. And we had this conversation before, and I think it's good to get into is you have $10 million worth of real estate that's being managed by, you know, whoever's on your board. If that happens to be, you know, a daycare worker and, you know, someone who does art, right? Like, not to discredit anybody who works in either of those professions. It's just an example, like maybe skills that don't transition super great to property management. Not that what I did, but, you know. But, you know, you have $10 million in real estate or $20 million in real estate that's being managed by this group of people that may or may not have the skill set to do it, and a property manager who might have the skill set but might not have the time. And what's that? If you don't put laws in place or you don't have someone watching this to make sure it doesn't go sideways, what the natural end of this could be is everybody lose their investment. Everybody loses their property. You just can't pay to keep it safe and sound for people to live in, for humans to inhabit.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of complexes that I get calls every week that are getting close to that point where they're getting close to no longer being inhabitable because management companies have just taken their money and not given them anything in return, and their HOAs have been low, and they're just like, well, we don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's really scary because, again, you trust the people that you're paying every single month.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And then you've got condo complexes in Florida that are just falling down, killing everybody.
Is that still going on?
Well, no, it was just one that happened.
But
they're changing like all the laws because of that.
News in a while.
You heard about that one, though?
Yes, right? I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that was really sad.
It was super
That was
sad.
a major short sight. Just bad.
Right. And now the insurance companies are getting involved because they're like...
Well, of course. They don't want to pay that out.
Right. And now insurance companies are dropping HOAs left and right because it's like it's getting too expensive. They're losing money every year, and they're not in the business of losing money.
So that's another one that I heard recently where a lot of insurance companies are just saying, nope.
You're not doing HOAs.
I'm sure there are reasons for it on their end. You know, they're there to make money. It's really scary for people who can't have insurance.
Yeah.
That's
super scary, especially if you have $17,000 in reserves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And
I can't describe to you the amount of associations that get turned over with, like, you know, 70 units, close to $500,000 properties, like $400 in operating and like $22,000 in reserves.
Yeah, well, again, so what mixture is it? Is it that their dues are far too low? Is it that it's being mismanaged? Is it a mixture? Is it?
It's all of it. And most of the time it's just, I think it's a mixture of all. I mean, I guess my perception is skewed because usually by the time they're firing their property manager and hiring me, which all of my clients are kind of new in the sense that I've only been doing this for 3-4 years, right? So usually by the time they fire them and come to me, it's like it's already gotten...
Yeah, it's ugly.
It's ugly. It's gotten pretty bad. I mean, you guys fired your big name management company to hire some kid with no experience who was like, yeah, I'll go take the course like next weekend if you guys let me do this.
You're welcome, Jared.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I think it was an indicator of desperation.
For sure. And again, I was coming on, I knew nothing about being on a board at all.
Right.
I knew nothing about owning a condo because that was the first place I ever owned. And so I was kind of leaning on the existing people. And when we couldn't lean on our existing management, then where do you go? And who am I to say, wow, we should go with someone else and just like blow it all up? Because at first, I'm not shy about speaking up, but at first, if I'm the only one thinking these things, then it's kind of more, maybe I'm just, this is how it goes, or this is legitimate or whatever. So it's scary. And again, it goes on for years. So I think it gets to the point where maybe I don't even know, but maybe our reserves were amazing at some point long, long ago. So what happened?
Right.
What's the story behind, was the association ever in a great position? Or was it always kind of waiting until the next month to be able to pay last month's invoice, and you just don't know. And I'd actually really like to talk to someone whose association is flush with reserve dollars to understand.
You know who you can talk to?
Who?
Your new downstairs neighbor.
Yeah?
Yeah, so the girl, she hasn't moved in yet, has she? It's just the guy.
It's hard to know. They're there a lot now.
They are, okay.
Yeah.
So the dad, I don't know if you met the dad.
Briefly.
Okay.
He pet Zoe.
He pet Zoe?
Yeah.
He's cool. Him and the son, they do rentals and stuff like that. And
Yeah, I was like, you guys want to walk upstairs? I mean, I got some stuff.
Really?
No, I should. I want
yeah.
to say that
Yeah.
to them, but I have not. Yeah.
So they bought into another association that is in Cromwell, and they said that that their experience has been great over there.
Oh, good.
And
So they exist.
They exist, right? They had a good amount of money in reserves and all this stuff, and it seems like it's pretty well run. But I also said, hey, you should try to get on the board and like see, what's really going on, or go to board meetings and stuff like that. And he really didn't. But they have a substantial plumbing flaw from when it was built.
Okay.
That's causing a number of water issues. But fortunately, they have enough in reserves where they're kind of able to pay it without putting in insurance claims. Mm-hmm. So they're okay for now. Now, my fear with that property is that it's going to reach a certain age where it's all going to start to go.
Yeah, like I'm seeing with mine.
Right. Mm-hmm. And once that happens, the reserves could dwindle quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So.
I mean, think about it. It's like if you don't have health insurance and you slip and fall, I mean, I don't care how much you have in savings. All of a sudden, this basic thing was like a $20,000.
Right.
So you might be in great shape, but it doesn't take a lot.
It doesn't. So I'm curious to see how that pans out. And I think just in our area, it's a relatively older part of the country. So a lot of the buildings and structures and things that are going on are older. And I think a lot of condo complexes they're going to have to take a serious look at like redoing everything in the near future. Unfortunately, I actually think you guys might be okay for a while. We'll see what a reserve
Well, I
study.
hope so. I mean, you're steering us a little bit.
Yeah, so right. So you
You're
guys are gonna do great.
I don't know if I'm capable, but
So I definitely, one thing I've learned is I never want to be the one to say I'm capable.
okay,
I would rather have other people say that for me.
that's fair.
No,
I mean, from what I can see, we're definitely on a better path. That's for sure. We need to have increases where it makes sense to pay for what makes sense. And again, I think we're getting there. It's just to no fault of anyone, but the fact that we've had really botched roofing, overall construction. I mean, the things I've found in my condo doing renovation, it's like, was there even an inspector involved? Like, how did this happen? But, if a place was built that long ago, like you said, it's just by default, you're going to have a lot of expenses to bring it back up to where it needs to be long term.
Yeah. It's true. It's just part of how it works, right?
Yeah.
These structures don't, without maintenance, they don't last forever,
Yeah.
right? So I do want to touch, because we're getting close to wrapping up. I think we've had a good run. But I always love to end with something a little bit entertaining. And you've had some entertaining stories from your experience in HOAs.
Yeah.
And maybe you can just walk, I know them all because I was your property manager or on the board with you, but maybe you can walk our viewers through some of the craziness and nonsense that you've experienced while living in your HOA life.
Oh, well, I mean, pretty much all of them come from one person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just good to know you're living amongst others. So it's, maybe someone twice your age sounds like they're having a dance party below, but they fell asleep to the TV with their new surround sound. So that was many times. And like I said, I mean, just smoke coming through, or just, it's a nice day out. You open the slider up. They're smoking outside. Just you're dealing with these people. Or wasn't there was a dog fight?
Oh.
Or there was actually a human fight about dogs.
Really?
Yeah. Didn't someone's dog was like off leash or something, and they said like they kicked it or something. It's craziness. But that's another thing. So you have dogs off leash. We had one person that finally moved out. They had 3 dogs, which I'm pretty sure wasn't in the rule.
Yeah. Who?
In building 7, all the little white dogs.
Someone had 3 dogs?
Yeah. They moved out probably 2 years ago at this point. Oh, so maybe, no, you were still there. Maybe it was like 3 years ago. I don't know. Huh. But they were just like always off leash and would run over to my dog and just.
Which one was that?
That's that one again. And the owner too, I'll never forget. She was like, that dog would eat you for breakfast. Like talking about my dog.
Oh, really?
It's like, yeah, lady. So like, get your dogs on a leash. Like, if you feel that way, why are you letting them just run around?
Right.
There's trash everywhere. I mean, there's always something. You've picked up a bunch of stuff that people leave. Yeah. It's just crazy. They're having I've seen birthday parties up at the pool. Which
we're trying to bring that back, by the way.
It's not, but to use the building.
Oh, yeah.
But, do your thing. But it's just, I think that people live there and they think I pay to be here, so I'm just going to kind of do whatever.
Right.
And that mentality is definitely evident. Arrests.
FBI raids. You remember that? Were you there for that one?
Oh, no.
There was an FBI raid in building 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, in building 2. I would have said building 1.
Yeah. No, that was...
building 1 was...
This was like last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was...
tuned it out. Oh, we had a German Shepherd sniffing out to find a child.
What?
Yes.
When was that?
Probably 2 years ago. So I got home and my neighbor asked if I had seen this kid. And I said, well, now that you mention it, it's been a few days. Because he used to always be outside all day long, every day. He'd want to walk my dog, but he weighed half her weight. So it just didn't make sense. So anyways, I said, no, I haven't. Why? Oh, he's missing. I said, really? That's terrible. So now fast forward like an hour and it's been almost all day at this point, and a German Shepherd came in, so we all had to go inside because the shepherd had to smell like the trail of the boy and not get off scent. And we ended up finding him. It was just like he was out and his mom called for him and he didn't come in or whatever. But I wouldn't have thought anything of it. He was always outside, but he was just in the condos behind us, like hanging out with his friends. So he was inside, so he didn't hear his mom call him and hear like all these police officers. And like, I was so, like, this kid could have like fallen in a ditch somewhere. Half the time he's on his bike on the main road. So yeah, I've seen a lot over the last 8 years, but fortunately, aside from the neighbor who's now gone, I'm fortunate. I can only really speak for the neighbors on my side, but they've been great.
So it was nice. It's nice now I have a ratio of like 1 to 50. Like I get one crazy for every 50 unit owners.
Okay. So we only have a couple then in the whole complex? Really? That
Yeah.
seems low.
Yeah. There's only really a couple that give me a real hard time.
Okay. Well, good.
There might be 2 now, but there was 3, and then one of them is now gone.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, just the trickle down effect of that, right? Where, you're getting contact high in your own unit when you don't smoke.
Yeah.
Because of all the weed that billows through the hallways and into your walls and up to your unit. And it's like, I don't smoke. I should be able to live in my own space without leaving smelling like weed and nicotine.
Well, there were times where, and so the cigarette smoke definitely bothered me more, but the weed smoke, it was to the point where it smelled like I was smoking myself inside on my couch. So my dad would come over and I said, Dad, listen, it wasn't for me. If it was, I would admit it.
Right.
But that's how strong it was. It was as though I definitely was smoking myself. So yeah, we know why that's happening, but it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's that you have developers that they make their money by building properties for as cheap as possible and selling them for as much as possible and doing it as quickly as possible.
I mean, that I've heard, but I'm just shocked. Isn't there someone that comes in and has to approve something to be habitable? I mean,
yeah, but most of the times the contractors or the builders play cards with them on the weekends or I mean, I literally heard that, where it's like, oh, this contractor's got a relationship with that inspector, whatever. It's like, it happens all the time. And, I was talking to one guy, he's like, in my entire career, I've seen one inspector in 30 years get up on a roof and actually look at a roof. You pull a permit on a roof, right? And the permit's got to get signed off.
You're supposed to, but.
Yeah. Well, legally, you got to pull the permit, and then the inspector's got to come and look at the roof and sign off on it. How many inspectors get on roofs and actually look at the roof? And everybody hears the stories of the inspectors that are super nitpicky and getting into stuff.
Those are the stories I hear all the time at work.
Right. And there might be. And then there's also inspectors that aren't like that. And then there's some inspectors that might be like that unless you buy them a bottle of wine, and then they're not like that.
Yeah, that's definitely crazy. I mean, again, even in just my profession, I'm confused by it every time that I hear a story because, and again, all my stories they're just hard asses. They're not allowing the job to continue on or whatever. And code is code. It shouldn't be open to interpretation. Mm-hmm. But inspectors often say it is. And the opposite of being boys together on the weekends is you have some kind of beef from 10 years ago.
Right.
And they're not approving you, or they're just being like, just really nitpicky, like you said, and this switch or whatever. And so that's a real thing too. But you do have to be careful. I learned that from just a standalone house, just like knowing the builder, knowing who they deal with, and understanding like what they actually went through for approval.
Right. Yeah. And you can tell, like, you got to know your builder. Mm-hmm. And you got to make sure that they did things the right way. And I would agree with that. I think that in the condo community, though, like when you have an owner build an apartment complex, the owner's going to want to make sure it's done well because they have to pay for the maintenance for the rest of, as long as they own that apartment complex. Mm-hmm. Right?
That makes sense.
When a developer builds a condo complex, they're selling it off. It just needs to hold up long enough where they don't get sued.
Yeah.
Whether that's 5 years, 6 years, a year. So they're just putting them up and selling them off as quickly as possible and then wiping their hands of it. And I've got 2 or 3 complexes that have been built in the last 10 years. And you see just as many shortcuts and issues, like even with current code.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's some stuff that's done, markedly better than your 1970s complex that was built when it was the Wild West, mm-hmm. right? But there's a lot of other areas where it's like, they did it like this. This shouldn't be this way. right? Or, we have one, again, $500,000 or $400,000 units, and they did not enclose the stairwells. It was just open, like we're in Florida. But they put sheetrock in there and like interior grade tile and fire suppression systems, but they left it so that like wind and rain could blow through the stairwells. And carpet. So carpet, sheetrock, and fire.
Like these are inside stairs. These aren't.
They're supposed to be, but they ran out of money, so they just left them open. Put some railings up.
But I'm saying these are stairs that are indoors.
Not originally.
Okay.
So
I only ask because I just wonder, is it something where like for hurricanes, is that dumb? Like so wind can pass through? Like I'm just wondering.
Yeah, no. It was designed to be enclosed, and then they ran out of money and said, we'll just put railings up instead of walls. Yeah, we're not gonna put walls and windows up. We're just gonna leave it open in Connecticut, but we're still gonna use sheetrock, which is gonna deteriorate over time. We're still gonna use interior grade fixtures because that's what we budgeted for. We're still gonna use interior tile and carpet. And they had to sue the developer, and they ended up winning and getting a $2.5 million lawsuit and finally put the walls up. So it's okay now.
Yeah.
But it's like the developer just left it like that.
Yeah. Well, and you'll see that, I'm sure, more and more the last few years just because the cost of everything has gone up so drastically.
Right.
I mean, look at homes that, new construction where it was starting at $350, $400, and now it's like $650, $700. So I just wonder where corners were cut in those situations as well.
Right. And so, then, it comes down to like, when you buy in a condo complex or an HOA, understand that these things happen, right? I think a lot of us, I know I was very naive to the fact. I just thought like if it was built, it was good.
You would hope.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
especially when it's multiple people in the dwelling.
Right.
Whereas I'm not saying that a single family home should be any less quality, but if multiple people are living there, you would think that there would be people like really paying attention to how everything's built, just the safety of it.
Right. And there's not.
No. I also wish though that I looked I don't even know if I would be able to, but like look through the financials before buying the condo.
You can.
Which again, at 24, I mean, I was just like the fact. Looking back, like I was looking at houses earlier, and I was worried about signing, and then I thought I was making like a quarter of the amount of money I was making. I signed for this condo, and I just again in that situation hoped I could trust the law office that was doing it and whatever. I mean. But when it comes to stuff like that and where you're going to live and just knowing the people that you're surrounded by, the property management, you can always check reviews on Google and stuff. Those are all things that should really play into your choice.
Yeah. Definitely check the financials.
Yeah, I wouldn't have not even. But you know what? At the same time, if I had, I don't think I would have noticed anything necessarily. Unless I had something to put it against. I would have had to hire someone or hopefully know someone that could look at it for me and say, hey, this seems kind of wrong.
Well, you might be surprised. Did it shut off again already? Mm-hmm. What a jerk.
They don't want to see me. They just want to see you.
It's funny. I usually sit on that side.
Oh, really?
And but the last guest I had on sat on that side as well, and he said the same thing. He was like, it just doesn't like my face, right? But you even if you asked for it, it would be very telling that a lot of management companies are very reluctant to give you the financials.
Yeah, that's true.
And like even to owners, even to board members, it's like pulling teeth to get financials from some of these management companies. And it's wild. And that will tell you a lot in and of itself. Like if they don't want to show you the books, they don't want to show you what their reserves are. Mm-hmm. They don't want to tell you if they have a reserve study or not, or when the last inspection was done. It's a problem.
Yeah.
And I know you really want that condo. It's just so pretty and it's such a good price.
And that's the thing. I think that people buy emotionally,
Right.
which is great for realtors. And I love my realtor.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when I plan to move, I'm going to use him again. And I haven't I've spoken to him, but I haven't seen him in 8 years.
Right.
But anyways, yeah, that's you get so excited about your own place or a different place or just the possibilities and oh my God, decorations and like all that stuff is great. But why don't you nestle yourself in a place and decorate somewhere that you can safely be and safely have your money invested? Because the other thing too, and we've discussed it, part of it as well is even if say I was selling tomorrow, the property management still affects me in that sale and the HOA amount and the special assessment and any of that stuff that all flows into how much I could potentially sell my condo for. So it's not just like, oh, set it, forget it. Like, I don't care. I'm moving on. You want to value those things because in the future, when you want to sell, those all are important things that people are going to look at.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. And, I think that's the theme we keep circling back to is that it's an investment. It's a business. Treat it like one.
Yeah.
Right? People get sucked in that trap of low HOA dues. And usually you'll see an inverse proportion to HOA dues or, the higher the HOA dues, the lower the price of the property and vice versa. Because people want to pay for more. They're like, hey, I'll pay more for a property with low dues.
You're like supplementing.
Right. And the problem is the dues are temporary. Whatever the dues are right now is not an indicator of what the dues are going to be next year. Mm-hmm. And actually, if the dues are that low, where are they not funding? Like the dues are that low for a reason. It's because they're not putting away money for things that they need to be putting away money for, or things that they need to be fixing. And if the dues are that low and it's like, oh man, it's the cheapest dues all around, like I want to do that, you're going to have those dues for like a few months to maybe a couple of years. And then when it hits, it's going to be I had to meet with an engineer for our Hartford complex because they need new siding, the big one's siding, but new siding, new paving, new fencing, all this stuff, a bunch of new windows and doors. And the engineer is working on currently doing basically a full tear down, all siding off, all roofs, all everything for this complex in Middletown that I was seriously considering because they had low HOA dues. It's like the cheapest round was like 180 or 190.
When was that?
When I was looking at
so this wasn't recent.
No, this was like when I was looking at before I bought the condo in your complex, right?
Yeah.
And I purchased that condo too because the dues were low. But I wanted something that had low dues because I thought like it all works together, right? Low payment, low dues, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And now their dues are going to go up. So like what I would have bought and it had $190 a month dues, 4 years ago. Right now they're looking on taking on such a big special assessment. They're probably going to be at like $600 a month, $700 a month, which is way higher than anybody else in the.
Well, you were probably looking at it from the lens I was where, they're low dues. Like they're really good with their money,
Right.
Wow. They've done it right where they're only charging $200. They could easily be charging $300 or whatever.
Right.
And then most likely they should be charging $300 and they haven't been. But you could usually see like, again, now in my unit, but also outside of it, just looking at it with a lens of, has this been maintained? Is there anything wrong with it? What do the roofs look like? What do the walkways look like? What are the paving? All things that, again, I didn't even pay attention to whatsoever, honestly.
Right.
But paving is super expensive, and we went through all that too, and it's fantastic.
It looks really good.
It does. It looks great, and new lighting and all that, and all those things are great. But if you're jumping into a place that has low dues and it has pavement crumbling and craters everywhere and, the lighting is falling down and whatever, all that's going to say is this is going to bump up or you're going to have a massive special assessment.
Right.
Because it can't go on forever.
Right. Yeah.
So.
100%. Do you like the new walkways that were just done? Building 1?
So I looked at them from a distance. I should go up and walk on them.
Yeah.
Oh, you throw your hands up. I don't go hang out with my buddies in building 1.
Well, I know, but I think we did talk about this. You said you might get a little jealous if you went and looked at them.
Yeah, because my walkway is not great. But so that makes sense. Right. That's the other thing. Stop doing Band-Aids. And those walkways are expensive.
Yeah.
And you won't be touching them again when I'm still there.
No, 20, 30 years.
Yeah. So think of, again, investment. What makes sense? Because if you're doing some Band-Aid fix, it's probably going to be more expensive overall because you only spent $3,000 instead of $10,000. But then guess what? You're going to spend the $10,000 anyways eventually. So now you're in it for at least $13,000. So you learn those things. And I think it's just a matter of determining where your money should go and if it makes sense to invest your money in that particular place.
Yeah, I agree.
And our location's awesome. When I talk about my condo, I definitely want my own place, but the proximity to everything, where it's located, if it's brought up, it can be really, really incredible, honestly.
It's such a unique property.
Yeah.
And it was crazy to me because it was in Cromwell, which is like Condo City, right?
Yeah.
Right, especially that part of Cromwell. When I bought in there, it was the cheapest condo complex in Cromwell.
Yeah, that's why I was there.
And I was like, but it's such a unique, beautiful spot. It's got nobody else has cedar plank siding, tongue and groove siding, real cedar. Mm-hmm. It's got this 70s postmodern look. It's got a lot of cool stuff going for it. And I'm like, if you guys just put a little bit of money into this could be the nicest because it's just so unique. There's nothing else like this anywhere. There's nowhere where you have this setting and they allow dogs and
Well, and that was a thing that I fought for on the board was the dog thing because I was just going to rent. But, and not to get totally off track of what you were saying, but you also need to think about, again, future value and who's going to buy it. And I knew that if we allowed dogs, and I understand it's a potential liability and insurance and all that, right? But a lot of people have animals. And I kept finding 40-pound restriction, whatever. Mm-hmm. And 40 pounds means 50, 55. No one's going to weigh my dog, right? But mine's almost 80. And, you monitor it, but that is a huge thing. And I specifically said that. I said, we have so many condos. We're not the most up-to-date with everything. We need to set ourselves apart. What will make us more intriguing than another nearby place? And the other thing is we want younger people to come in, have it be their first home, grow into it. And we weren't getting that. I think we got a lot more just because of how the market has been the last few years. Right. But just being unique, and it really is a great property for a lot of reasons.
And we've gotten that. I mean, since we've changed stuff around and started managing it better, and younger people are moving in. They're buying that.
They are.
And so the dog thing wasn't always a thing. That was something you pushed for?
So apparently, and I'll never forget this, when I moved in 8 years ago, I brought my dog out of my car, and one of my neighbors in my building was like, he said something like, who approved your dog?
Was it Dennis?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he adores her.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He said, we just voted through with the town that we have a weight restriction and maybe even breed restriction. I don't remember. Definitely weight restriction. And I said, really? My realtor never said that because that's the whole reason why I'm here. I kept running into 30-pound, 40-pound. One place said 12. I'm like, what? They said all animals welcome 12 pounds. Like a bird? I mean, cats don't even weigh 12 pounds.
You have some bad cats.
So just say no animals. Like that's
Right.
fine, but don't, So anyways, so a few years ago or maybe a couple years ago, whatever, they wanted to actually enforce the weight restriction because I guess the board 8 years ago had put that in, but then they had never filed with the town or something like that. So the docs weren't updated. So I guess I've been grandfathered in, but they wanted to go for a 30 or 40-pound weight restriction. And I said, we're closing the amount of people that can actively come here. Now, does it make sense for a Great Dane to live in those units? Probably not. But at the same time, who are we to say, okay, 60 pounds is acceptable, but 80 pounds isn't? Like, where does that come from? What's the difference? They're not taking up any more space in the common area. So it's more so I need to determine if it's good for my animal in my own unit. So finally, I don't know if we put a weight restriction or if...
There's a combined weight of 60 pounds.
Oh, 60. Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I know.
Zoe's grandfather. It doesn't matter. But
Zoe's also super well behaved and you're a really great owner. So it's like, I'm not.
well, so I think, no, so I do remember that now where I think we said, because they wanted to go 30 or 40. And I
Right.
said, it's just too low. And I think it's because I said, in reality, again, 60 pounds, no one's weighing your dog. So
Right.
people 75-ish and lower are going to be there.
just not
And
gonna have,
we're
like,
cool with it.
120-pound dogs.
I think their concern, because of that, me being honest about it, was if we said 75 pounds or less, people would throw in a 100-pound dog.
Right.
So I think now I'm remembering that's where we went with the 60.
And
but I bumped it.
Right.
Yeah.
And we did have a 100-pound dog in building 2, but it was a service dog.
And one guy had like 2 huge dogs. I haven't seen him recently. I think, again, it is partially a liability, whatever, but to me, you deal with those people on a singular basis. You don't make it so that people can't come here. And the reality is most people have animals.
They do. And you have to, and I think you make a good point of what's the culture of the association? What's the culture you're trying to build? And, what is the ideal resident you're trying to go for? So like one thing that we're big on is there was a lot of tenants and investor owners when we took over.
Yeah.
And there usually is in most places when we take over. And that's not really great for the community, right? But really, like, part of the identity for that association has been a dog-friendly community. And they have the space and they have kind of the vibe to do it and get away with it. And as long as the unit owners are responsible with their dogs and they pick up after them and all this stuff, it's like that's part of their thing.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
And I didn't want to live by the typical what happens in the world all the time is that, like one bad person ruins it for everyone.
Right.
Let's just hold people accountable and punish that particular individual if their dog is off leash or if they're not picking up after the dog. Let's not make it so that no one can even, like, if we made it such a low restriction, like the weight, we would immediately be cutting out all these potential buyers from entering our little complex.
And you have a bunch of really good unit owners that just happen to have bigger dogs. Yeah. That couldn't go anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's great. And that's the other thing too, I think you bring up that, we want to be, rules are important and it's good to enforce them and keep people accountable, but it's also important to be reasonable about them.
Yeah.
And understand, like you said, take it on a case by case basis. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the power trip of being on the board. And it's just like the very strict letter of the law thing. Right. And for each community, it's going to be different, but there's going to be rules that are more that you have a little bit of discretion on to work with people and have a little compassion, empathy on it. You want to be like
understanding.
Right. And so it's good that Dennis didn't kick you out for having it.
And again, he loves her so much.
Yeah.
But when he had said that, I was like, oh my, I hope not. Because
Right.
again, I saw nothing on it. So I was just fortunate because I was struggling to find a place. And we live with these people all the time. And so the rules are definitely important. But if they're so regimented that it's like giving you anxiety about being cheerful with your Christmas decorations, it's not a place you want to live. And right. I'm not saying you're going to be best friends with everyone, but again, I have a great relationship with my neighbor across the hall and the neighbor below me, not as much, but just because he's not there. But I was already living a life where you can have someone. Sorry.
No, you just reminded me. You said the neighbor below, and the guys had collected a check from him earlier today.
Oh.
And I'm like, did they leave the check or not?
Gotcha. I already lived the life where it was anxiety ridden, and I just didn't know like what each day would be like. So you want to promote a place that's well maintained, but also, like you said, culture to some degree where you're just happy living there.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I think that's great. Anything else you want to chime in on regarding HOA life and your experience at the Squire?
I don't think so. Again, just condos are usually someone's first step. You know, they're more affordable than a single family home. You don't need the upkeep. That's why you have the property maintenance. But because you're expecting that upkeep, you need to have a good property manager. Right. And just people on the board hopefully are involved and understand what you're getting into and understand that you do have a say, but to a degree. So that's another thing. If you're living amongst a bunch of other people and you want to get along well and you hope that they have similar views as you as far as how your money is used and decisions that are made and all that, because sometimes if you're outvoted, like you're outvoted and that's it. Yeah. And your money goes where it goes and you're still living there and hopefully you're not super miserable.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Or your neighbor below is smoking so much that's going into your unit and there's very little recourse that the condo docs allow us to go and make the neighbor stop smoking.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was a tricky one. But it is. I mean, condos can be great. You just have to understand all the things that go into them. Yeah.
And I love how you're still positive about it.
Well, if you had interviewed me, like 5 months ago, this would have been an after hour interview session for people to listen after hours because one person can make you absolutely miserable. And that's really unfortunate because people work hard, they come home, they want to chill, and one person can ruin that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then that person goes and now life's great again.
Rainbows.
And it's awesome. And I love her point is or your point rather, I don't know what I'm talking about. I love your point about condos can be great.
Yeah.
Condos, I mean, you're going to make so much money on your condo.
I hope so. That's what people keep saying.
So, but it just has to be done right. And I think the purpose of this, what we're doing, this Lord's work we're doing right now, is by educating people on A, the stuff to look out for, but B, like what are the ways that this can go wrong? Because I'm sure there's a lot of other people that are going to be watching this that listen to your story and they're like, I'm going through that right now. Yeah. And to know that they're not alone. it's very I mean, it's so common. I see it so commonly that like this is why we're doing this stuff, because just people need to be educated about it.
Yeah.
And they know that there's something better out there, so that they can, either go find that better management company that's going to treat them the right way, or, if they can't, then they can call us, even at a distance, and maybe we can't manage them, but we can give them the tools and resources that they can, either self-manage or implement stuff in their own association to make their lives better.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and while I appreciate you coming here and doing this, I am 10 times more appreciative that you rolled the dice on me 4 years ago.
You're welcome.
And I would not be here if it wasn't for you and you taking that risk and pitching it to the other board at the risk of looking like an insane person.
I don't know that I've really thought about it as much as I have in the last couple hours.
You're like, man, that was in retrospect.
Man,
that was
really could have been wrong, because it was a little heated for a little bit.
Was it?
Well, just fear of because it's a lot of money that's being managed, and we need to make sure that it's the right move.
Yeah.
So
look where we are now.
Yeah.
So thank you. Who knows? If we take over the country, you're going to be responsible for it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll put in a pension for you or something.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Or you can come, if you want to jump ship, there's always room. There's always a need for skilled people in property management.
Yeah.
If you want to sell your soul.
I think I'm good for now.
Yeah. Because you were thinking about not property management, but making a change.
Yeah. We'll see. It's one of those things where I don't want to get too into it, but you just you hit a stage in your life where you kind of get the itch and you need to decide if you're going to do something. So we'll see. Time will tell.
Go pitch someone on something ridiculous. Might turn into something.
You never know. It's usually the dumbest stuff that makes millions of dollars.
It's true. I've been watching your boy, by the way, Ramit.
My boy. Oh, Ramit Sethi?
Yeah.
Oh, he's the best. Do you like him?
I like him as a person, and I like.
You're like gearing me up for what you don't like. Go ahead.
No. I like him as he has a very different philosophy and approach
than
like
Dave Ramsey.
Dave Ramsey, yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Right.
See, to me, Dave Ramsey served the purpose at the time for the generations that really listened to him, like on the radio and stuff. Like I remember I'd be at my grandparents' house listening to Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
But Ramit, he is just, I think he's just, it makes more sense for the generations coming up, the way the world is, how much things cost, and not just squirreling money away forever and then, oh, yay, retirement. Well, by then, like, how well can you walk and what's your health like and all that. So,
yeah. No, I do like that, and I get that. So I'm going to tell you what gives me pause with me. This is the one thing that was like, is he has a much more palatable approach.
Yeah.
Right? Than Dave Ramsey.
Right.
But I also look at like his sponsors, and it's like Rocket Mortgage and all these other like big institutional companies. And I get a little suspect. I'm like who's, because he does, so Dave Ramsey's the whole like no debt thing, right?
Yeah.
And then Ramit's like, just spend money on the things that you are really important to you, and then save a ton on other stuff. But the anytime there's big institutional money sponsoring someone, I always just kind of get a little.
I didn't even notice Rocket Mortgage for him.
Yeah, I watched a few videos, and that was just one of the sponsors.
I know, like the Element is one, like the hydration packets.
Okay.
I mean, there are a bunch.
Okay.
But or like Babbel for language development, stuff like that.
Oh, I got you.
So I've never seen Rocket Mortgage.
It may have just been the one that I saw.
He definitely calls out like Bank of America, Wells Fargo.
Oh, he does?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
What did you listen to? Netflix or his podcast?
I was listening to his podcast where he
Okay.
like meets with different couples and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a
And
new one every Tuesday.
yeah, so that's, I mean, like I said, I like him as a person. I like his demeanor, his character, like everything about him seems really good. That was the only thing that I picked up on. And because I resonate with the whole like Dave Ramsey, like just because, and especially right now with interest rates the way they are and all this stuff, like I can see how things can unravel so quickly when you start taking on debt. But I also use debt sometimes in short terms at low interest rates to accomplish certain missions, then I pay it off real quick.
So I guess that's the difference. You're already coming from an approach that's healthy. Like you already understand money and you view money as a resource, as freedom, as something positive.
Yes.
Whereas a lot of the people on the show, it's negative, it's stress ridden. And so he is coming from a place where if he is saying debt's okay, it's because he's teaching them the mindsets that it's comfortable where when they go through this and then they start to take on debt, that they'll know how to handle it. Whereas right now, I mean, if you listen to some of them, it's just like a mess. I'm like, I just love it. I love it.
I just love.
Well, I love hearing all these different stories and just like trying to understand how people could ever be X amount in credit card debt or, student loans is a huge one. And yeah, it's really interesting to see how, like, what people think about things, how they got there. And the flip side is he's had a couple was near retirement. They had, I think, like $6 million or something like that in the bank. And they're sitting there arguing over like $50 on this bottle of wine. And it's like, what?
Right. Yeah.
But then you have people that have $6 to their name buying that same $50 wine. And they're like, yeah, whatever. Like, YOLO. So it's just, all that stuff like fascinates me. But
I think I do appreciate he gets into the psychology of purchasing and the psychology of money, which
he's the only one.
Yes.
I think that's the big difference.
Well, Dave does it as well, but he approached it from a very different mind. It's not like he does the baby steps. He's built the baby steps to be a psychological hack in a certain way with the debt snowball. Because ideally, in a perfect world, numbers wise, you would start paying off the highest interest thing first. But he starts with paying off the smallest and rolling it up.
That's true, because that does like make you feel good, gives you momentum, all that. Yeah.
And also there is multiple camps, even in like the big business world. Like, cause I read a lot of stuff by billionaires and, hundreds of millionaires. Alex Hormozy is a big one that I listen to a lot. I love his stuff, but there's the Alex Hormozy, like Warren Buffett, Dave Ramsey camp, where it's just like, debt's bad, pay cash, right? Like Warren Buffett, makes $100 million a year and has a $100,000 house or whatever it is. Like, it's just, the level of frugality.
Oh yeah.
Relatively speaking, he, always carries around like $800 in cash.
But so I think that's what I like about Ramit though. It's the $7 latte thing makes me laugh every time, but it's truly like, you need to save. Frugality is great, but if you can adjust that so that you get to a point where as you increase your salary or income, whatever, you are comfortable with what you've saved, and therefore you're not being, just throwing money around and you're not paying attention. It's just that you've automated it so that you're comfortable with what you're saving every month. Then you have more money to kind of at your discretion. So I like that because, again, money is good.
Money is good, yeah.
And money for me, it's so funny. My mom actually recently asked me for the first time ever, like, why I'm so good with money. Because I always have been. It's been a running joke in my family.
Okay.
And I think just not even realizing it, but the way that the circumstances that happened when I was brought up, I think made it so that, and I don't know if this is true, but I do not ever want to depend on anyone else's money for me to live how I want to live. So when you have parents that divorce when you're 2, there's any relationship at all already argues about money. That's still the number one reason for divorce. I'm pretty positive. But when you have a divorce, it's even more contentious.
Yep.
And I think just seeing that, and again, I wasn't like consciously ever thinking about this. I'm not like, oh my God, I need to save every penny because I don't want to argue about money. I think it was just that I don't want to ever argue about that. And I don't ever want to get to a point where I am even just wanting money from someone else in order to make it deserved or, everything. No thanks.
Right. Yeah. And you feel like the principles you've learned with Remy are more effective to that end goal for you.
Yeah, because it's not about just all restriction.
I agree.
Like Dave Ramsey is, again, great, serves the purpose for that moment in time. But I think we're finally getting away from grinding all the way until 65, now 70, 72.
Right.
Just kind of living more in the moment, allowing yourself, once you have set up no debt on your credit cards and once you've set up savings in your 401k and your Roth IRA, like, yeah, you can spend that $5,000 in Hawaii and like, it's okay. But for the longest time, I mean, even up until a couple of years ago, I'm 33 years old, I'm making good money, and I was like, I'm not paying more than $40 for jeans. Like, what? I wear them every day.
It's true.
So I was just in that habit of, I need to save. It's not that I felt guilty spending money on myself. I was just like, that's outrageous, because I'm still thinking jeans should cost $20 and, whatever. I went to the movies. A Slurpee is like $8.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
But guess what? I bought it because I wanted it. That's what I thought about. And I knew it was ridiculous. But I have the money. My savings are good. Why am I going to punish myself about this?
No. And I agree. And so I think why I like Dave Ramsey is because I naturally overspend.
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't have thought that about you.
Yeah. So I'm my natural.
Your wife's listening like, yeah.
Well, yeah. So she's the couponer.
So you're dead opposite.
Yeah. So she's got like a storehouse of like a year's worth of shampoo that she got paid by Walgreens to take out of their store because of how good she is at couponing.
So she loved that show, Extreme Couponing.
Oh, she
lives it.
Yeah, she lives it. She doesn't watch it. So but the dark side of that is, like, I'm kind of minimalistic. Mm-hmm. She'll buy stuff just because it's cheaper on sale.
Yeah, no.
I can't, it's like, it just leads to clutter and it drives me nuts.
Yeah, no.
So, yeah.
Plus, like, things can expire. Like, there's just no need for it. They're like, oh my God, but you can. I'm like, yeah, I'm not spending my time on that. That's the other huge piece.
Yeah.
Ramit, he goes over also, as you make more money, as you scale, understanding your time and where it's most valuably spent, right? So it's like, if you love mowing your lawn, cool. But if you don't, swing the $50 to someone else and do something else for an hour.
Right.
So for me, couponing and stuff, it's like, no.
Not your thing.
No.
But
I love saving money. I used to love the 3-mile long CVS receipt.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I know what I like at this point. If it's on sale, it's a plus.
Right.
Whereas before, it's like that dictated what I purchased.
And that's how I am. Like, naturally, I'm okay spending $700 on something I know I like my skis, right? Like, that's a big thing. Or, I save where I can, but I'm okay spending in certain places. But but I will say the amount of money we've saved, because she's never spent more than 7 cents on a bottle of shampoo, and they're usually $7, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of that stuff, there is a tremendous amount of savings there, but I have to, there's a lot of extra clutter because you're buying stuff simply because it's on sale.
Yeah.
And the people I've watched, when you get past a certain point, you can't cut coupons to $1 billion, right? You can cut coupons to $1 million, but not. So I had this guy on. You're actually going to really love this other podcast episode with this guy who has a property management company, but it's for like tenants.
Okay.
And tenants and investors and stuff like that. He's out of Meriden, and the dude is like, I mean, I don't want to put his business out there, but he makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. He pulls up in like a 1996 Nissan Sentra with rust holes in the side.
Yeah.
And like clothes that don't fit well, right? And comes in and we have an awesome conversation. It was like we podcast for like 3 hours, and it was just talking about business and numbers and processes, and just like phenomenally intelligent dude when it comes to business.
Yeah.
And like the content from that, I'm sure, is going to be fantastic. But it was just interesting. He's like, I've got to break that mindset because it's coming from like a scarcity, just trying to save his money. He's like, I'm looking for another car and I'm trying to spend less than $2,000 on it. He makes that in less than a day. He's like, at a certain point, it's worth more. I'm spending more money in the time I'm wasting because my time's so valuable.
Correct.
Than it is to just buy a car.
Like, give yourself an hourly rate like this, and maybe the couponing is great, but if it took you 30 minutes to find a coupon, or let's say it only took you 10, okay?
Right.
10 minutes to find a coupon for this particular item, whatever. How much, if you were working an hourly rate, how much would you have made in that 10 minutes? So easy numbers, let's say you make $60 an hour, so it could just be $10.
Right.
So
you got to save at least more than $10.
Yeah. So if you save $5, you're like, oh my God, it's normally $5 and I spent 5 cents, but you still lost.
Right. Well.
So if you enjoy it,
right.
You know, if I'm 65 years old, 70 years old, and like I'm trying to like really stretch my time, maybe I'll like it. But just like thrift stores, I don't even like TJ Maxx, Marshalls. And as a woman saying that to another woman, it's like I just slapped her in the face.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, I like this shirt. I'm finding my size. I'm not flipping through sizes and finding a shirt that I like. You know what I mean? Like, no, it's not worth my time.
So everybody's got their thing. So like I probably spend more than I should on food. Like that's
my thing. I can tell you how much I spent on food and drink last year because I have a card that only does that.
And how much?
It was almost $11,000.
Yeah, we were at like 20
by myself.
I know, that's a lot. That's your thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not mad about it because I genuinely enjoy it. And I don't, I made more money, and that equated to like, oh, I'm going to turn my heat up from 65 to 67. Like, that's truly where my mind is. But then I'll spend $100 on a dinner casually, like by myself.
Because that, and that's part of, I think I do like about his process is that ends up being the thing, your thing.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a value to that because that's what brings you happiness. That's what makes you feel like, okay, my life's good. My life's going okay. For me, I like food. I like, I like skiing. I have certain hobbies that I do.
Yeah.
But like, I don't care about clothes. I buy my clothes at Costco. It's $16.95 for a pair of pants. It's got like a selection of 3 colors. I'm like, okay, this one's good.
But
right?
see, it's what you prioritize.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, the car, he clearly doesn't care.
He does not care.
Which, to a degree, I'd want it to at least be safe, right?
Well,
it doesn't even sound safe.
I think there's an aspect of pride. He also has 6 kids.
Okay.
So I think there's an aspect of pride because you're a real G when he's probably multimillionaire, right? And just like driving around a $650 car. But it also he talks about how it's building character for his kids, right? And it's just
well, because that's the thing too. That's a tricky one. If they grow up in a gorgeous home,
right,
with
everything,
whatever kind of car, they just think that's normal, and it's not.
Right. And he says for him, he's always bought real estate. So where he splurges is his home. He's like, I've got a nice house. Yeah. It's like I could have a nicer house, but I've got, that's where I put my yeah. So everybody's I do like that. But so I think why I gravitate towards Dave Ramsey and all these very frugal mindseted people is because that's my weakness is I was very bad with money and I was very bad with overspending. And my answer to that is just make more money. Yeah. And I can out earn my bad habits most of the time. Okay. But it only works if I'm consciously working on like curbing and reeling in my spending. That's like that's my weakness. So that's the thing I always have to work on, which is why I gravitate towards these guys that are, or these people, right? That are very like save, don't go into debt, don't do all this stuff. Because, you know, when I look at taking on a loan at this interest rate and I'm like, oh yeah, I can out earn it. I can make it make me money. It's like, I need to have that fear in the pit of my stomach to actually outwork it and make sure that, like, I bought my truck. This truck, I bought it straight through the business, and they gave me like a 13% interest rate, 12.9.
That's so crazy.
Right. And I was like, but my plan was to just pay it off. Like, and I was like, I did it only because it forced me to pay it off in like 2 months.
Yeah.
And then I went and I did it, and because it was in the process of like selling a piece of the business and whatever. So it was like, okay, got to do it. But, you know, it's one of those things where like, if I have the low interest rate, like my Chevy, I had 1.9%, I was never going to pay that off. Right?
Yeah. My car was, I think, 2.4, and I was going to just pay it off. And then I thought, it's just basically free money at this point, essentially.
It is, but it's a payment.
But it was my only payment outside of my mortgage.
That's true.
So, you know, I paid off my student loans before they were, like, long before they were due. So I really don't have debt outside of my condo. And now my car is paid off. But it was something like I was going to pay it off a little bit early or whatever, because I've always paid cars off early. Okay. Always. It's usually I take a 5-year loan and I paid it off in like 3 or whatever. And I think I was looking at paying like $73 in interest for the year.
Oh.
I'm like,
yeah, at that point.
It's a cash flow thing.
Right.
But you said you paid off your truck in 2 months, but let's take a step back and say that you position yourself where you could do that. Like you already had the money where you could pay it.
Right.
That's the issue. Most people, if most overspenders, they have a ton of debt and they're going to pay it off and they have no money to actually pay it off.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. I've worked to get here.
Yeah.
Right. But, you know, I definitely don't I would like to prioritize my savings more.
Okay.
Because, so this is another like hack that I've learned for myself. I'm very bad at saving, but I'm good at spending. So what I do is I spend all my money on assets that are going to make me more money. So like, I'm not a huge fan of Grant Cardone, but
I don't know who that is.
Okay. So he's a big, anyways. But like he said something that resonated with me deeply. He said, I go broke every few years because all the money he makes, he just throws it into another project or another investment or another business.
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of how it feels for me, where it's like, anytime I get money, I know I'm going to spend it. So I just choose to spend it on things that are potentially going to build me more money, make me more money. So I sell the landscaping and snow removal, but I invest it in this because my goal for this is to make me more money than that can make me with less work.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm okay spending 14 grand on, you know, some furniture and equipment and stuff like that and a computer to edit videos, because if I sell 14 of these courses, it's paid for itself.
Yeah.
And I can sell infinite number of courses with that first initial investment, right?
That's the passive income that really takes off. And Ramit talks about that.
Right.
Because he has courses too. So it's definitely smart. But it's interesting, like, is savings just boring?
I get anxiety about only getting like 10% or less on interest. Like for that, I just rather would put it into businesses or deals that I know I'm going to make more. That's why I like flips. I like real estate. I like stuff that I can guarantee higher rate of returns. And money sitting in the bank is just money that I know isn't working for me at the rate that it can be or should be.
Do you have a goal, like for retirement or anything like that, that's like pushing you to keep feeling that way? Because eventually you're not going to hopefully not feel that way anymore. You'll have to stop at some point.
I actually had this conversation with the other guy. I don't know. I think once you get to a certain point, there's just a competitiveness about it that, you know, you'll be fine, but it's just like just trying to do more. But I don't see myself, like I've never envisioned myself being someone who has like a nest egg that
Interesting.
is just enough to retire on. I've always imagined myself having businesses that continued. Like I see my pathway, not like, you know, I have 10 million in the bank that gives me 3% every year and I just live off the 3%. I see myself as having businesses that are running themselves and still paying me.
Gotcha.
Because I own the business, or I own part of the business. So I'm more of like a, like, I don't know, I don't want to use Musk as an example, but these guys who just own equity in businesses that make enough money where they don't have to worry about working because the business is going to live on without them.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to create a business or get to a place where the business, even if I step away, that my equity in it, my portion in it will continue to pay me out.
Yeah.
And I think that's a more likely scenario for me.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why I just keep going broke, investing in more business and better business.
Yeah.
And it's not like broke. I
Yeah.
still have like 6 months where, if I stopped working today, I'd be all right. But like,
But again, I think people just don't really understand. Like you said that so passively. Like I have 6 months, and like people don't have 6 days.
I know.
So, and I don't mean that to point out their situations. Those exist as well. But there are people that make 3 times as much as you that have nothing.
Yeah.
So whenever people say, "Oh, someone's making $100,000 a year," like that can mean they have a ton of money in the bank. That can mean they have no money in the bank, living paycheck to paycheck. Like you just don't know.
Tons of overhead.
And they go broke.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Fixed costs. He's huge on that because he said you can always change the discretionary.
Right.
But once you put yourself to a higher level of fixed costs,
Right.
you're never going to want to go below that. If you have this beautiful home, you're not going to want to change that, which the home is probably your largest fixed percentage.
Right.
You're not going to go from this, beautiful home, well-kept, brand new, whatever, to some dumpy place. But if you needed to go from going to really nice restaurants to like pretty good ones, whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
it's a decision that you can make relatively easy. It's a change you
yeah.
can,
But you take on a $600 car payment. Yeah, you could sell it back. I mean, you're going to lose a lot of money. What, are you laughing at $600 car payment?
No, because I've been toying with the idea of selling the truck and just getting a clunker after talking with this guy last week.
Yeah.
When you said $600, I'm like, I'm thinking of getting a $600 car.
But yeah, $600 a month is not unheard of. $800.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
$800. My former boss from years ago, he had an $800 car payment and his wife. $1,600 a month. I'm like, that was a mortgage. Yeah. How are you comfortable with that? Like, do you know how much money I would need to make to
justify
jump into that?
So for the 3 months that I had the truck payment, it was like $1,250.
Wow. Yeah, but you knew.
I know, but there's people who are.
It's scary.
That are just rolling with that. Like that's what. Even my Chevy payment was at 1.9%. That Chevy was like $750 a month. That's why I sold the landscaping and snow removal. So this is a good example of how Dave Ramsey has positively affected me. I sold the landscaping and snow removal component because even though it was a huge revenue, like it brought in a lot of revenue, it was also by far my highest overhead cost. So I had to work. I had to have landscaping and snow contracts to pay for the $5,000 worth of equipment payments and truck payments that we had.
Yeah.
Every month because we had the loaders and the tractors and all this stuff. So it's like it felt never ending because while you're making a ton of money, the second you stop producing, you no longer can afford any of this.
It's the same thing with your staff though. But if you're not taking on contracts, or what, not even just for you, even contractors that I have and they have electricians out in the field, it's great if you scale, but if you don't have the jobs to cover your payroll, you're also stuck.
Right.
Because then you're whatever it is, if you need to pay out, this is just a completely arbitrary number, but like if you need to pay out $30,000 a month because you've scaled. Well, now if you're not getting those jobs, or like look at the last few years, like new construction in a lot of places, it's not happening or it's to a halt because you can't get material. you're setting yourself up where you need to cover that payroll and you need to work that hard. And yeah, you can let guys go. No one wants to do that.
Right.
So, having the landscaping business, having that overhead, it's just another example of you set yourself up where you have to hit this delta at least. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of pressure to, maybe you do it for 6 months, maybe you do it for 6 years. You can do it for another 6.
Right.
It's a lot.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think that's why I'm now looking at stuff in the perspective. I think this course is a good example of, and this is through the people I've been watching them, that if I take on more properties, I have to hire more staff.
Yeah.
I mean, everything I scale about this business, especially service-based business, I can only do so much, which means I have to hire, train, and get more people to service more clients.
But it's good that you know that, because so many people take on, they
Right.
see the shiny dollars.
Right.
And they take it on. They don't have enough staff. Then they're scrambling to get staff. Then they get crappy staff.
Right.
And then you're just deteriorating
The quality of the product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it happens so much.
Yeah.
It's not even greed necessarily. It could just be like a certain stage in your life, like, oh my God, my wife's pregnant and, whatever. Or my in-laws just moved in because we can't afford to put them in a home, so they're living with us. Situations change. But you think about that too. How stressed are you on a normal day running your business? Now you have baby on the way, in-laws moved in, whatever the situation is. Now you're going to live off that stress and just then you're going to get those contracts. Then you're not going to have the right people in place. So then you're going to get calls about people being pissed off at the product that you're giving.
You got to go pay to
and
fix it.
it's just like this
or you get
spiral.
sued. Yeah.
A huge spiral.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how you end up getting, that's how all these construction companies get sued.
Yeah.
Right. And it's super difficult. Which is why I think that there's, and again, I wouldn't have thought this way had I not been consuming these books by high net worth people, but they're looking at opportunities that are more scalable because for each incremental piece of growth, you don't have to invest that much extra into it. So like training or videos or media or marketing is a good example because you can sell, if you've made a course or you've made a product, you can sell that infinitely without having to scale your staff up to sell to more clients, right? Maybe you redo the course or retape it or whatever.
Yeah, in 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
Yeah, but there's not a huge extra cost of selling more or insurance companies. Alex always talks about insurance companies. He's like, they're just evaluating a risk, right? And they've got an algorithm to do that. And then they're just collecting money. But they can sell because they're just applying that algorithm, that risk assessment algorithm to more clients. It's like it doesn't take that much more proportional to how much more they can make.
And that's correct, but they've also figured that out,
Right.
So they've positioned themselves in businesses or doing certain things where they determine that scaling up doesn't cost that much. Because there are definitely businesses where it does cost a lot.
Right.
So it just depends.
And I think a lot of the people, well, Alex especially, he's like, I've been trying to get out of the businesses that require a high amount of capital and resources to scale.
Yeah, which is smart because you can only do so many things, and making a bunch of money is great, but not if you can't even take time to
enjoy it,
hang out and, with friends and family and whoever. Then what's the point? I mean, I see people all the time. They're like, yeah, I'm growing and I get it. They're in there. That's another thing I love about Remy is the seasons. I don't know. I really love that. That resonated with me a lot because it just showed that it's not linear. So everyone coming up, like the people that listen to Dave Ramsey, they were also taught that you're at this one job.
Right.
And it's applauded that you're there for 25, 30, 40 years, which, and maybe that's fantastic. I mean, I have people in my business. I have a guy at my branch. It's 35 years.
Right.
And that's commendable. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. It's just not what people are doing anymore. And it's okay to flex. Like, I've been grinding since I graduated college, but now I'm at the point where I'm good with my savings. I like my life. I want to enjoy it even more. So I think that I'm transitioning more into like lifestyle season.
Right.
But then maybe when I'm 40, I'm like reinvigorated. Like, let's do this again. I found this awesome idea. And then I'm back to grind.
Right.
That's okay. You don't have to stay stuck in it. And it also doesn't even matter what your age is. 65, I hope to retire early, but that doesn't mean never make money again.
Right.
That just means I can step away from this. It's a choice. And if I want to freelance, if I want to, take on whatever, I can, but I don't need to.
Right.
That's retirement for me.
Right.
And people are like, oh, you'll be so bored. What do you mean? Like, it doesn't mean I'm just going to like sit on the couch every day. It just means maybe I have the time where I have a good chunk of change and my friend wants to open up a business and they need investors and I'm able to do that. And then I have a stake in it. And, those opportunities would be awesome. And again, it doesn't need to correlate with a certain age. So maybe at 55, something crazy happens and I'm back in grind again because it makes sense. So I don't always have, you slow down and you want to slow down. You think that, but does that mean that you'll give up an opportunity just because, I'm 55 now. So like, I better, love being at home. Maybe.
I don't know. I know that I enjoy working as long as it's something I like or that I'm into.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I feel like I don't know about everybody, but I know men especially, and this may be true of everybody, but specifically, I've seen that men, once they retire,
So men love being providers, whether it's for their whole family or themselves.
Right.
It's a sense of purpose, and that's the biggest thing. So I read a ton of financial articles, but I also read a lot about retirement. And the number one thing that keeps coming up in articles that no one's talking about, because everyone focuses on, oh my God, are you going to have enough money in retirement? And okay, well, let's say you do. You have no purpose anymore, So I think about that all the time, where you can pigeonhole yourself where, you're just, let's say that you were a stay-at-home dad, just to like flip it.
Right.
So your only roles in life are husband, dad, son, and maybe friend. But if you're working, then your company is expecting things of you. You're bringing things to the table financially. You're involved in decisions because you can be, not saying that stay-at-home dads can't be involved in decisions, but,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I like having various roles. And the other thing is when you're near retirement, unfortunately, most people don't have a ton of friends anymore. That circle just kind of dwindles. Mm-hmm. And so you're really just like dad and husband, which is cool, but it's nice knowing people are relying on me outside of my house. So I think that's it. Just like you don't feel like you have a purpose anymore. Like, yeah, it's cool. Your wife loves you and your kids love you, but eventually they grow too, right? So then they don't. So now it's just husband.
Right.
Now you're like, that's a lot of pressure to just be that every day.
Right. I get that. That makes a lot of sense. And so we need to be more useful than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're waking up, you have guys calling you
Right.
every day, your staff, you have properties calling you every day, you have board members calling you, you're needed. So even if that's stressful, you're needed.
Right. And I think that that's part of where the spiritual components of my life, I think ultimately those kind of stay past, right? They stay past the secular pieces, but like just being of service, like, right, stuff like that. Like I actually have to go to service meeting. There's a business once a month. After our home group, we have a business meeting. So I skip the meeting, but the business meeting I got to be there because I'm the treasurer.
Okay.
So I'll have to leave in like 3 minutes.
That's fine.
But yeah, those other groups and communities where you can take all the things you've learned and all the resources and just all the things you've got to, like from a business standpoint, all that stuff kind of closes out, or you've trained or you've hired your way out of certain roles in the company. But I think the ultimate purpose or goal is to be of more service and more useful in some kind of spiritual path or spiritual tradition, whether that's or a religious thing or whatever it is. I mean, everybody has their practice, right? But I think without that, it's really tough to carry that meaning of life into those later years. Because if our careers are only the thing that gives us the greatest meaning, then when that starts, we're all, as we get older, our minds start to slip and all that stuff. And it's like, well, what can we still, if we're not able to provide as much value in those capacities as we once were, what are we going to have?
And the other thing quickly,
Yes.
it's interesting you say that, because now with like AI and everyone's saying that's going to like take over and everything, the projection is that all those types of jobs like you're talking about that are more spiritual, and again, I'm not religious whatsoever, but just even as far as like mental well-being, relationships, just people coming together, anything along those lines, they're predicting that those roles are going to be huge, because more and more we will not have human interaction. And they're already seeing, like through COVID, they already saw just a total downfall spiral of mental health, of people not getting affection because people were staying away from each other. And it's very necessary. And so I'm kind of hopeful, because we already kind of moved into where mental health isn't taboo, and it's like people, it's like a real thing.
Right.
And so I think it's great if you are already starting stuff with like, and whatever, where you're building those circles and you're helping people, because it sounds like that kind of support will be very necessary.
Yeah. And it's one of the most rewarding components, right? Because like you're able to you don't really take credit for changing anybody's life, but you're able to be there to witness it. And it's a way of giving back, because like, and I'm pretty open about this even on this format, but like having a history of, drugs and alcohol, and now having the life that I live today is really one of the pillars that helped bring me from that spot to this spot. So of course, like you want to give back to what's given you so much. And the cool thing is, it's not even in like a job capacity. Like, yeah, there are jobs around that in recovery and stuff like that. But the point is to do it, just give it away, right? The point is, because that's like, it's been given to you, so you give it to the next guy. And there's no more gratifying, like as far as like feeling good about doing something, there's no more gratifying thing to see someone struggling through a disease or addiction or life circumstance, and just being able to be there for them, and just being in a position in life where you can.
Yeah, it's genuinely fulfilling.
Yeah.
And it's so rare. I was just telling my friend the other day, sometimes I'll go on Instagram and it'll be like MD Motivator is one of them, but where people just hug people, or like they give them $1,000 and it like brings them to tears and whatever. And that could be gimmicky, but like these people clearly are reacting as though this is life-changing for them. And I find myself like crying, like happy tears. And it's because it's strangers connecting and showing empathy and cheering each other on. And I feel like we don't even do that enough in our own circles of people we know and love. Never mind strangers. We're like, why are you talking to me? Like, what's your agenda or whatever? We just have such a hard time helping others. It's kind of just like we live our lives so selfishly. And I see it more and more. So when people are willing and generous with their time, like you've been, it is fulfilling. right? I mean,
No, 100%. It's the only thing that keeps us like, for me, it's what keeps me sober. It's like, that is what brings the sense of joy, ease, and contentment that drugs and alcohol used to.
yeah, you see people win.
Right. And you know it's possible, and you see that it's possible for them. And there's a lot of heartbreak in it too, because they can't see it for themselves.
Yeah.
But when they do get it, maybe the third, fourth, fifth time or whatever, maybe it's the first time, but it's like, and you see their lives change, and you're like, oh man, I was able to be part of that. Just, just witness it. Like I didn't do much, but I was there for it. Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, and thank you for being generous with your time.
Yeah, no problem.